The rain had started before dawn. It tapped against the narrow archive windows with such steady rhythm that it sounded like someone patiently running their fingers across the glass. Almost none of it could be heard in the underground levels. Down there, only the low hum of the ventilation remained, along with the buzz of fluorescent lights and the occasional dry crack of old metal contracting in the night cold. Daniel Carter arrived before everyone else. Since the case involving the Japanese recordings, he had rarely slept for more than 6 hours. It was not fear, at least that was how he explained it to himself. The archive simply felt more honest in the early morning. Before the employees arrived, before the phones started ringing and the official requests appeared, every object remained what it seemed to be. A box was only a box. A hard drive was only metal and plastic. An old document did not try to convince its reader that something else was hiding inside it. Daniel switched on the lights in the intake sector and saw a wooden container on the central table. It had not been there the previous evening. The container was a little over a meter long, reinforced with steel corners and secured by 2 wide straps. Dark moisture stains marked the upper lid. They were not droplets but long streaks, as though the crate had been left standing upright in the rain for several hours. A folder of paperwork was attached to its side. Daniel began with the intake form. The shipment had arrived from Japan through a private transport company. The sender was listed as Hoshin Civil Engineering. Under contents, the form identified maintenance logs, technical reports, photographic materials, and mapping documents discovered during the reconstruction of a closed transportation structure. The structure itself was not named. The only identification was a project number, K17. Daniel turned to the next page. It contained a short letter in English, prepared by the company's legal department according to the letter. Workers had uncovered a hidden recess behind a concrete wall while dismantling an old technical room. Inside were logs from several different periods. The earliest dated back to 1949. The construction company requested an independent examination of the material. The reason was phrased carefully. The discovered records contained inconsistencies that could bring the accuracy of previous engineering surveys into question. Daniel read the sentence twice. Construction companies did not send dozens of kilograms of old logs across an ocean because of an ordinary error in measurement. Local engineers, insurance departments, and legal teams existed for that purpose. The archive became involved when documents began behaving in ways they should not. He did not open the container. After the previous case, the archive had changed its protocol. All international materials with an unknown risk level now required inspection by at least 2 employees. Daniel called Eleanor Brooks. She answered after the second ring. Daniel briefly explained what had arrived. There was a pause on the other end. Eleanor did not ask unnecessary questions. She told him not to open the crate and said she would be downstairs in 10 minutes. She arrived in 7. She wore a dark coat still covered with small beads of rain. Her gray hair had not fully dried, and several thin strands rested against her temple. Eleanor placed her bag on the table. Read the paperwork and studied the project number longer than Daniel had, K17. She moved one finger over the printed symbols as though checking whether the ink would come away on her skin. "Do you recognize it?" Daniel asked. "Not yet." That was the full extent of their conversation. They moved the container into the inspection room. It was a small space with white walls, a steel table, and a camera mounted near the ceiling. Nothing remained there for long. Materials were either returned to the sender or moved into isolation storage. Daniel secured his gloves and cut the straps. The latches opened with difficulty. One was bent, though there were no signs of impact anywhere on the crate. The lid rose several centimeters, then stopped. Eleanor helped him hold it. Inside were the logs. There were 43 of them, dark green, brown, and gray. Some had hard covers, others were ordinary notebooks wrapped in oiled paper. Rolled plans lay between them, along with envelopes of photographic negatives and 3 small metal boxes. The smell inside was not the smell of old paper. The container carried the odor of wet stone, cold water, and something similar to railway dust. Daniel knew it well. It was the smell of sealed underground stations opened for the first time after decades of abandonment. Several Japanese words had been written on the inside of the lid. They were not printed. Someone had written them by hand with a black marker. Eleanor photographed the message and uploaded it to the archive's internal translation system. The software could not identify every symbol. Parts of the writing had faded, and the handwriting was uneven. The translation produced a single sentence: "Do not measure its length during rain." Daniel looked toward the inspection room window. Beyond the thick glass was an empty corridor. He could no longer hear the rain from there. but he remembered its sound. Eleanor carefully removed the uppermost log. The cover was dated 2018. Below the date were the name of a contracting company and the surname of a shift supervisor. The entries were in Japanese, but the technical markings, numbers, and diagrams needed no translation. The opening pages contained nothing unusual. Electrical inspection, replacement of drainage channels, cracks in the western wall, corrosion in the metal supports. Daniel turned the pages slowly. The entries were dry and precise. Date, time, crew members, completed work. Every section had been signed by 2 people. The problems began on page 27. A 6-man crew had been assigned to walk from the southern entrance to the northern one while inspecting the emergency lighting. According to the plan, the tunnel was 620 meters long. The crew entered at 8:10 in the morning. They emerged at 9:14. The log stated that every light had worked. No obstruction had been found and the workers had maintained a normal pace. Daniel looked up. It did not take an hour to walk 620 meters. He returned to the entry the next day. Another crew repeated the route. They mounted a camera on a service cart and recorded the entire passage without interruption. The distance counter on the wheel showed 608 meters. The crossing took 57 minutes. A day later, the engineers performed a laser scan. The result was 904 meters. Someone had written in the margin, "Scanner operational." Checked twice, Eleanor stood beside Daniel, reading the translation as it appeared on a tablet. Her expression did not change, but Daniel noticed that she had stopped touching the pages from then on. He was the only one turning them. New measurements followed: 611 meters, 897, 622, 1,140. The engineers used measuring tapes, total stations, laser rangefinders, inertial sensors, and satellite positioning at both entrances. The equipment was tested in other locations. No faults were found. The tunnel consisted of one straight passage, no branches, no hidden chambers, no sharp turns, yet no measurement matched the one before it. By page 38, the entries became shorter. Crew did not emerge within calculated time. Then, radio connection unstable, and later, footsteps heard ahead although tunnel is closed at both ends. The next line had been crossed out so heavily that the paper had torn. Daniel held the page closer to the light. Beneath the ink, fragments of Japanese characters were still visible. Eleanor used a camera with an infrared filter. The recovered sentence appeared slowly on the screen. The northern exit remained in front of us for 40 minutes. At first, Daniel assumed the translation was inaccurate. Then he noticed the technical drawing below the entry. Someone had sketched a straight tunnel and a small rectangle of light at the far end. Several parallel lines marked the route taken by the workers. The lines did not move closer to the exit. Each one ended at the same distance from the rectangle. The next 3 pages had been torn out. After them, the records continued in a different hand. A new shift supervisor wrote that the previous engineer had been removed from duty because of nervous exhaustion. Laser scanning was suspended. Workers were instructed to enter only in groups, leave one person at each entrance, and avoid working during heavy rain. The final page contained a brief note. Inside, it is impossible to determine how far you have traveled. Watch only the clock. Daniel closed the log. The room seemed quieter, though the ventilation system had not stopped. Eleanor examined the remaining notebooks in the container. The dates on their covers spanned nearly 70 years. Others carried no dates, no company names, and no signatures. Daniel selected the oldest one. Its cover had been soaked and dried many times. The page corners had fused together. Inside was a thin sheet containing a typed translation, apparently added by the sender. The first entry concerned repairs after a landslide. The second described an inspection of the masonry. The third recorded the disappearance of a worker named Kenji Morita. He had entered from the southern side to retrieve a missing tool. 20 minutes later, the guard at the northern entrance heard his voice over the radio. Kenji asked him not to turn off the lights. The guard replied that the lights were still on. Kenji repeated the request. Then the connection ended. A search team crossed the tunnel 3 times. They found neither the man nor the tool. 9 hours later, Kenji walked out through the same southern entrance he had used to go inside. He was exhausted but uninjured. According to him, he had been walking forward the entire time. He believed no more than 40 minutes had passed. After the incident, the engineers measured the tunnel again. The construction plan showed 593 meters. A mechanical wheel measured 601. A chain tape measured 594. A crew on foot required 52 minutes to pass through. Daniel turned the page. The same warning had already been written there in 1949. Do not measure its length during rain. The handwriting was different from the message inside the container. Different ink. A different hand, a different period. But the sentence was identical. Eleanor asked Daniel to bring the preliminary classification sheet. They arranged the logs by year and began comparing the records. Within 2 hours, it became clear that the documents did not merely describe similar incidents. They repeated one another. The 1956 log mentioned a crew that could see the northern exit but could not reach it. The 1971 log described an engineer who heard footsteps ahead, despite both entrances being closed. The 1988 record stated that a laser device measured almost 900 meters while a video camera documented a little over 600. In 2006, a worker disappeared inside for 7 hours and returned through the same entrance, convinced that he had walked forward the entire time. Even the wording was nearly identical. Different people, different companies, different equipment, the same sequence. First, the measurements began to differ, then the crossing time increased. Next, the workers heard footsteps. After that, someone saw an exit that never moved closer, and in nearly every decade, one person returned through the wrong side. Daniel recorded the patterns in a separate file. At around 11 in the morning, he noticed another detail. Several of the logs contained the number K17. It could not refer only to the 2018 reconstruction project. It appeared in documents from 1963, 1971, and even in the margin of the 1949 record. Daniel placed 4 books beside one another. Each carried the same number, K17. Eleanor studied them for a long time. Then she opened the Archive's restricted database and searched the sealed international cases. One result appeared, Access Limited, created in 1998. Title: K17 Spatial Irregularities in Transportation Structures Preliminary Report. No author was listed. The file contained only one page. It showed an old tunnel entrance photographed during rain. The opening was a dark stone shape cut into a hillside. Wet branches hung above it deep inside. A faint white point marked the opposite exit. Below the photograph was a short statement: the structure does not alter its physical length. It alters the distance that must be traveled. A warning appeared beneath it: do not conduct further investigation without access to the original construction logs. Daniel turned back toward the container. None of the 43 books were original construction records. The earliest dated from 1949, according to the sender's summary. The tunnel had been built much earlier. Daniel opened one of the metal boxes from the bottom of the crate. It contained photographic negatives. The second held keys for technical doors. The third would not open. An engraved diagram of the tunnel covered its lid. A straight line connected 2 entrances. At the center was a small mark resembling a door. No such door existed on any of the later plans. Eleanor photographed the box from every angle. Daniel checked the transport inventory. Only 2 metal boxes had been listed. The third had never been recorded as part of the shipment. While they examined the lock, a telephone began ringing in the corridor. The Archive's internal line rarely rang. Calls to the intake room were even less common. Its number was not public and had never been given to outside contacts. Daniel lifted the receiver. At first, he heard only noise, not electrical interference, not static. It was the sound of water falling onto concrete. Then came footsteps, slow, even. They seemed to move closer. Although the echo never changed, Daniel remained silent. After several seconds, a man's voice spoke softly in English. "How many meters have you already walked?" The line went dead. Daniel slowly replaced the receiver. Eleanor did not ask what he had heard. His face had already answered her. On the table between them lay 7 decades of logs, a locked metal box, and a photograph of a tunnel whose length never remained the same. Beyond the archive walls, the rain continued to fall, and for the first time since the container had arrived, Daniel did not think about what might be waiting inside the tunnel. He wondered whether this case was truly waiting for them in Japan, or whether the distance had already begun to close. By noon, the rain had grown heavier. Water no longer struck the windows in separate drops. It ran down the glass in continuous sheets, blurring the city beyond. The upper floors of the archive gradually filled with voices, elevator chimes, and the movement of metal carts. But almost nothing changed inside the inspection room. The telephone did not ring again. Daniel Carter checked the internal call log. The system showed no incoming connection. The most recent entry was a technical line test performed 3 weeks earlier. He repeated the search, expanded the time range, and examined the records from the central exchange. There was nothing. The receiver should have remained silent. Eleanor Brooks made no attempt to offer an ordinary explanation. She only ordered the telephone disconnected and transferred to the technical laboratory. Daniel pulled the cable from the wall as the connector left the socket. He briefly heard the sound of water through the receiver again. This time there were no footsteps. Daniel placed the telephone inside a protective bag and sealed it. They did not discuss what he had heard. The archive followed a simple boundary. Until an event was recorded by equipment or confirmed by another witness, it remained a personal observation. That did not make it less real, only less useful. Eleanor returned to the photographic negatives. The first metal box contained 37 strips of film. Each had been wrapped in thin paper and marked with a date. The oldest was from 1951, the newest was from 1998. The same description appeared on many of the wrappers. Central section. None of the known tunnel plans identified a separate central section. The drawings showed only one straight gallery with two narrow maintenance recesses positioned near the entrances. Daniel carried the negatives into the photo laboratory. They could not be fed through an automatic scanner until he understood the condition of the emulsion. Old film could be destroyed by excessive light or improper tension. He worked under red illumination, arranging each strip across a glass surface. Eleanor watched through the protective window. The first images were ordinary: a stone tunnel entrance, workers beside a rail cart, emergency lighting cables, water inside a drainage channel, walls darkened by moisture. The first inconsistency appeared on film dated 1963. The photographer had stood inside the tunnel and aimed the camera along the straight gallery. The exit was visible in the distance. Lamps burned on the walls at regular intervals. Daniel enlarged the image. A dark vertical line marked the left wall near the center of the frame. It might have been a crack. In the next photograph, the line was wider. In the one after that, it resembled a narrow gap between a door and the wall. The fourth frame showed a rectangular opening. There was no room visible beyond it. Instead, another section of tunnel began behind the doorway, illuminated by identical lamps. Daniel checked the order of the film. The frames had not been rearranged. Their numbers were sequential. In the fifth photograph, the doorway had vanished. Only the wet stone wall remained. Eleanor entered the laboratory after Daniel restored the safe lighting. She studied the enlarged frame for a long time. The second tunnel beyond the door looked almost identical to the main one. The same masonry, the same cables, the same width, but its lamps were mounted on the opposite side in the main tunnel. The lighting ran along the right wall beyond the door. It ran along the left. The passage resembled a mirrored copy. Although the photograph itself had not been reversed, a crew number on the jacket of a worker near the edge of the frame could still be read correctly. Daniel opened a digital copy of the 1971 plan. There was no door in the center of the gallery. Using the spacing between lamps as a reference, he aligned the photograph with the drawing. The approximate location of the opening fell 600 meters from the southern entrance, according to that same plan. The entire tunnel was only 620 meters long. The door should have been almost beside the northern exit, yet the photograph showed at least another 50 meters of gallery beyond it. Daniel tried another scale. If the 900-meter laser readings were accurate, the door stood roughly 2/3 of the way through the route. Both interpretations were possible. Both contradicted the photograph. The northern exit appeared ahead as a light source only a few dozen meters away at the same time. The doorway opened sideways into another tunnel extending into darkness. Eleanor asked him to examine the remaining film. There was no door in the 1971 series. Instead, 3 frames showed a worker wearing a pale safety helmet. He stood far ahead of the photographer with his back to the camera. In the first frame, the distance between them was roughly 100 meters. In the second, the photographer had moved closer. The worker remained the same distance away by the third. The exit was close, but the man still stood between the photographer and the light, neither approaching nor retreating. The log from that year listed 5 members of the inspection team. All 5 were visible in photographs taken near the entrance. The man in the pale helmet was not one of them. The 1988 film contained images of laser equipment. Engineers had installed a tripod in the southern section and aimed the device toward the opposite exit. In one frame, the digital display read 897.4 meters. In the next, it read 603.1. The device had not moved. The people beside it stood in the same positions. Only a few seconds separated the photographs. The final series was dated 1998. That was the year the preliminary K-17 report had been created and later stored in the Archive-S restricted database. These photographs had been taken with a better camera. The images were sharper, and every exposure included a card showing the time and frame number. The first showed the southern entrance during rain, the second showed a group of 4 investigators, the third showed an open equipment case, the fourth showed watches synchronized at 2:06 p.m. Then the tunnel sequence began. Every 10 minutes, the investigators photographed their progress. In every frame, The exit remained a small white point ahead, 216. 226, 236, 246. The distance to the light did not change. At 256, a door appeared in the left wall. It was different from the opening shown in the 1963 film. This was a narrow wooden door installed directly into the stonework. The wood appeared older than the tunnel itself. Dark watermarks covered its surface, along with a small metal plate. Daniel enlarged the image. The plate was stamped with one designation, K17. The next frame was taken at 306. The door stood open. Behind it was a small technical room with concrete walls. A table stood inside, along with a mechanical measuring instrument and several stacks of journals. Daniel held his breath. They might have been the original construction records missing from the shipment. Only part of the room was visible. One investigator stood in the doorway holding a flashlight. The others remained behind him. The frame taken at 316 was damaged. Almost the entire negative had turned black. Only a narrow section survived along the bottom. It showed the investigators' legs. All four were facing the photographer. The 326 frame showed an empty tunnel. There was no door. There were no investigators. The photograph had been taken from very close to the floor, as if the camera had fallen from someone's hands. The next frame was taken at 443. It showed the southern entrance from inside the tunnel. Rain fell outside. One man sat on the ground with his face hidden in his hands. No other members of the team were visible. Daniel found the matching entry in the 1998 log. 4 people had taken part in the survey, 2 Japanese engineers, a representative of the insurance company, and an independent consultant from the United States. Only one returned. Japanese engineer Masao Ishikawa emerged from the southern entrance 2 hours and 37 minutes after the inspection began. He claimed the group had found no door, according to him. They had walked through the tunnel without stopping and emerged from the northern side after approximately 25 minutes. He remembered nothing after that. Search teams never found the remaining members. The northern post had not seen anyone emerge. The camera near the southern entrance recorded only Ishikawa's return. The official investigation was closed for lack of evidence. The disappearances were attributed to an accident in the surrounding mountains. Although none of the 3 people had left the tunnel, Eleanor read the translated account several times. Daniel examined the final photograph more carefully. Ishikawa sat on the ground, covering his face. A camera lay beside him, but the photograph had been taken with that same camera. Someone had to be standing inside the tunnel, photographing the man who returned. The log provided no explanation. Daniel tested the negative for signs of double exposure. There were none. The image had been taken normally. The photographer stood approximately 6 meters from Ishikawa, inside the tunnel. Eleanor ordered all of the images digitized and placed under restricted access. Then they returned to the 3rd metal box. Its lock did not match any key found in the neighboring box. The body was steel, but the mechanism inside appeared much older. An X-ray showed a simple cylindrical lock and a stack of thin objects resembling notebooks or folded sheets. The box could only be opened without damage by hand. Daniel examined the keys one at a time. There were 9. 8 had ordinary Japanese labels: Southern Electrical Room, Northern Drainage System, Emergency Gate, Tool Storage. The 9th key had no label. It was longer than the others and had an unusual pattern of teeth. The same designation was engraved into its head, K17. The key entered the lock but would not turn. Daniel did not force it. He noticed a thin numbered ring around the keyhole. It resembled the scale of an old measuring instrument. The markings began at 0 and ended at 1,200. The pointer rested at 620. Eleanor selected one of the logs. She found the 1988 measurement of 897 meters and rotated the ring to the closest mark. The key did not move. Daniel set it to 904, the result of the 2018 scan. Nothing. Then he tried 593, the original planned length mentioned in the 1949 log. The lock clicked softly. The key turned. The box opened. Inside were 3 thin books wrapped in dark cloth. The upper one had a rough cardboard cover. It carried no title, only a date. Daniel and Eleanor looked at one another. The date came before nearly every document in the container. They might be holding one of the original construction journals. Daniel unfolded the cloth completely. A folded plan lay beneath the books. The paper was thin and brittle. Black ink formed the main drawing, with red markings added afterward. The lower corner carried the name of a Japanese engineering company that had ceased to exist decades ago. The tunnel on the plan was not straight. It consisted of 2 separate galleries. The first ran between the southern and northern entrances. The second began near the center of the first, followed it in parallel. and ended in a sealed chamber beneath the hillside. A narrow doorway was marked between them, K17. The main passage measured 593 meters. The parallel gallery measured 311. Together, they totaled 904 meters, the exact result produced by the 2018 laser scan. For a brief moment, Daniel felt relieved. There was a rational explanation. The scanner might somehow have detected a hidden parallel gallery. The old door could have been sealed during reconstruction. The conflicting measurements might have been caused by an unknown void inside the mountain. Then he studied the drawing more closely. The parallel gallery had no exit. It ended in a circular chamber labeled Measurement Section. A note had been written beside it in Japanese. The archive's translation system offered several interpretations. The most accurate read: additional length is used to compensate for the route. Daniel did not understand the wording. Eleanor opened the 1927 journal. The first entries described ordinary construction work, reinforcement of the slope, installation of supports, diversion of groundwater. Later, the records became strange. The engineers complained that their survey measurements did not match. The southern and northern headings had been excavated from opposite sides of the mountain and were meant to meet in the center. But when the two crews completed their work, the tunnels did not connect, according to the calculations. They crossed. In reality, a solid stone wall remained between them. The engineers checked the coordinates. Both teams were in the correct location. Each tunnel occupied the same space, yet they did not touch. After several weeks of additional excavation, workers found a narrow cavity inside the wall. They widened it and installed a door, marking the location K17. Beyond the door was another gallery. No one had built it. It was finished, reinforced, and fitted with drainage. Tool marks on the walls resembled those made by the construction crews. The gallery repeated part of the main tunnel, but its length changed every time it was measured. The construction supervisor ordered the cavity used as a compensating section when the main headings could not be joined. Part of the route was directed through the unknown passage. That was how the tunnel was completed, not by cutting one continuous path through the mountain, but by using a space that should not have existed. The final pages of the journal were written by another person. They reported that workers began losing time inside after the tunnel opened. Some heard construction sounds behind the walls. Others encountered crews wearing work clothes from earlier periods or uniforms that had not yet been manufactured. During rain, the K17 door appeared in the main gallery. In dry weather, it was almost never found. The journal ended with an entry dated November 14, 1927. We sealed the door from both sides. During the night, it appeared again in the center of the completed tunnel. Its distance from the southern entrance was 417 meters. Its distance from the northern entrance was also 417. Daniel stopped reading. If both measurements were correct, the tunnel had been at least 834 meters long that night. The next sentence was written with a trembling hand. It does not become longer. It adds road between the traveler and the exit. The words almost exactly repeated the conclusion of the 1998 report. Eleanor turned the final page. A small black and white photograph had been attached to the back. A group of construction workers stood in front of the K17 door. 17 men. Those in the front row held shovels and picks. A dark rectangular opening stood behind them. Everyone faced the camera except one man. The figure in the far corner stood facing the door. His body was blurred as though he had moved during the exposure. The names of all workers had been written on the back. The list contained 16 people. Daniel counted the figures again. There were 17. A second note had been added beneath the list in different ink: do not allow the last worker to leave first. The meaning remained unclear while Eleanor examined the second journal. Daniel opened the third. There were no written reports inside. Only tables. Each row listed a date, weather conditions, tunnel length, and the number of people who entered and returned. The records covered the period from 1927 to 1944. On dry days, the length remained near 593 meters. During light rain, it increased to 620 or 700. During heavy storms, the readings exceeded 900 meters in one case. In September 1935, a crew measured 742 meters. 11 people entered the tunnel that day, 12 came out. The following morning, one worker disappeared from the dormitory. The record did not identify which one. His name had been erased from every list. Daniel turned the page. The final completed row was dated 1944. Weather: heavy rain, entered 8, returned 8. Recorded length unknown. The note read they returned with the correct names, but not the correct memories. Every table after that was blank. Eleanor closed the books. She no longer had any doubt about the next step. The documents could not be investigated entirely from the archive. They needed access to the tunnel itself, the records from the latest reconstruction. And the person who had sent the container. Daniel opened the letter from Hoshin Civil Engineering and found the name of the responsible engineer, Naoki Sato. He called the number listed in the paperwork. An automated message said the line was no longer in service. Daniel contacted the company's main office. After several transfers, an employee from the legal department answered. She confirmed that Naoki Sato had supervised the first phase of reconstruction. Then her voice became more guarded. Sato no longer worked for the company. He had disappeared 11 days earlier. His vehicle had been found beside a closed road near the tunnel. The doors were unlocked. His telephone, papers, and wet work clothes remained inside. The keys were missing. Daniel looked at the 9 keys arranged across the table. The company employee added that Sato had called the office several times at night before his disappearance. He asked them to stop reconstruction and prevent workers from demolishing an old wall in the central section. His warning was ignored. The wall was removed. The recess containing the logs was discovered behind it. When Daniel asked about the third metal box, the woman said she had never heard of it. He requested photographs of the container taken before shipment. The files arrived several minutes later. The first image showed the open crate inside the company warehouse. It contained journals, rolled plans, and 2 metal boxes. The space where the third box had rested in the archive was empty. In the second photograph, the lid had already been closed. The straps were secured, the seals were intact. Daniel compared the serial numbers. It was the same container. The third box had appeared inside after the crate was closed in Japan, but before it was opened at the archive. Eleanor reviewed the shipping history. The cargo had flown from Japan to Los Angeles and then traveled by road to the archive. Sensors recorded no opening of the lid during the journey. The only anomaly involved its weight. At departure, the container weighed 86 kilograms. On arrival, it weighed 91. The difference almost perfectly matched the weight of the box and the 3 journals. Daniel remembered the warning written on the 1927 photograph: "Do not allow the last worker to leave first." Perhaps the tunnel did not move only people. Perhaps it moved objects between locations it considered part of the same route. The archive had not received the journals because someone placed them in the crate. They had completed the journey on their own. Near evening, Eleanor filed an emergency request for a field investigation. She contacted the Japanese insurance representative, local engineers, and an official from the Transportation Authority. Hoshin Civil Engineering responded quickly. The company agreed to provide access to K-17 on one condition: Daniel and Eleanor had to sign a document acknowledging that the tunnel was closed because of structural hazards. The legal language was ordinary: collapse, flooding, unstable masonry, lighting failure. The document did not mention inconsistent measurements, missing workers, or a doorway in the central section. Their flight was scheduled for 2 days later. Until then, Daniel had to complete the digital processing of the photographs. He returned to the 1998 frame showing Ishikawa seated near the southern entrance. The image continued to trouble him. Someone had been standing inside and holding the camera. Daniel enlarged the dark edges of the tunnel around the frame. At first, there was nothing except film grain. After adjusting the contrast, a shadow emerged on the right wall. It belonged to the person taking the photograph. Daniel could see the outline of a shoulder, a head, and an arm raised toward the face. But the shape did not match the camera's position. The shadow was far too long. It extended nearly 10 meters along the wall. Daniel enlarged the area around the head. A second silhouette appeared on the concrete, smaller. It stood inside the first person's shadow. A pale safety helmet covered its head, the same helmet seen in the 1971 photographs. Daniel checked the exposure time, 4:43 p.m. At that moment, the laboratory lights went out. Emergency lamps activated immediately, filling the room with a weak red glow. The corridor beyond the glass remained empty. Daniel heard water moving somewhere behind the walls. Then came footsteps, not from the corridor. They sounded beneath the laboratory floor, slowly. They crossed from one side of the room to the other. Daniel remained still and followed the sound. The footsteps stopped directly below the K-17 metal box. The pointer on its numbered ring trembled. It no longer rested at 593. The needle began to move. Then it passed every known measurement. Eleanor entered the laboratory just as the pointer stopped. 126 meters. At the same instant, a new email arrived on Daniel's tablet. The sender was unknown. The subject contained only one designation: K-17. There was no written message. Only a photograph. It showed Daniel and Eleanor standing in the inspection room beside the open container. The image had been taken that morning from the upper corner of the room. The security camera was mounted in that exact position, yet the official footage did not contain the frame. Daniel enlarged the photograph. Behind them, beyond the thick inspection room glass, the corridor was visible. A man in a pale safety helmet stood there facing the glass. 1 second later, the email vanished from the system. The file had not been saved, but Daniel had already seen what mattered. The man behind the glass had not been looking at them. His head was turned toward the corridor wall as though he could see a door there that they had not yet learned to see. The plane landed in Osaka shortly before noon. A low gray sky hung over the runway. Rain had already been falling for several hours and, according to the forecast, would continue until the following morning. Water gathered on the terminal windows, distorting the outlines of aircraft, service vehicles, and workers in bright safety vests. Daniel Carter had barely slept during the flight. He reviewed the digitized logs several times, even though he knew the most important entries from memory. The table from 1935 troubled him most. 11 entered, 12 returned. One worker disappeared the following day. The records did not explain whether the additional person remained with them until morning or whether one of the original crew members had vanished. There were no photographs, medical examinations, or statements from relatives, only an erased name and a line someone had tried to make unreadable. Eleanor Brooks sat beside the window. Reading the files from the latest reconstruction, Hoshin Civil Engineering had provided them only hours before departure. The company sent hundreds of pages of technical reports, but nearly all concerned ventilation, lighting, drainage, and masonry reinforcement. None mentioned K-17, none included photographs of the hidden recess. The official report called the wall in the central area a non-functional concrete partition. Daniel had read enough corporate documents to understand language like that. Non-functional usually meant no one could explain its purpose. Partition meant something no one wanted to call a door. A man in his mid-40s met them outside the terminal. He wore a dark, waterproof coat. His name was Hiroshi Tanaka. He represented the Prefectural Transportation Authority and would accompany them during the inspection. Tanaka spoke English slowly but precisely. He did not waste time with formal greetings. He immediately explained that access to the tunnel was restricted. Reconstruction had been suspended. The northern entrance had been sealed with a metal gate. Security remained stationed near the southern side. 3 Hoshin employees had refused to return to the site, even after receiving written orders from management. 1 resigned, 2 others took medical leave. Tanaka did not call it fear. He said the workers had lost confidence in their measuring instruments. For an engineer, that was almost the same thing. They drove north from the airport. The city gradually gave way to suburbs, then to hills covered with wet trees. The road narrowed. Rain softened the sound of traffic, erased distant shapes, and made every opening in the mountainside resemble a dark cavity. Daniel sat in the back seat and watched the navigation display. The journey to the site was expected to take a little over an hour. 20 minutes before arrival, Tanaka turned the navigation system off. The screen showed the vehicle traveling on a road that did not exist on the map. The blue route line continued straight through the mountain, then curved back toward the same position. Tanaka did not comment. He unfolded a paper map and placed it on the dashboard at a junction. They turned toward a small police facility. A white service vehicle stood under a shelter with its hood open. A local detective named Kenji Watanabe was waiting for them. He was investigating the disappearance of Naoki Sato. Sato's vehicle was being kept in a locked garage behind the main building. It was a dark sport utility vehicle, already covered in a thin layer of dust. The driver's door remained unlocked, just as it had been when the vehicle was found. Daniel began with the interior. A plastic folder of documents rested on the front seat. An empty water bottle lay on the floor. A telephone without its battery was stored in the center compartment. Police had dried and packaged the wet work clothes separately. Eleanor asked to see them. The jacket, trousers, safety vest, and 1 pair of gloves were covered with fine gray dust. It did not match the roadside where the vehicle had been found. That area consisted mostly of dark, wet soil. Daniel collected a sample under magnification. The dust contained old concrete, lime, and small black grains of unknown material. Some reflected light like metal, but did not respond to a magnet. A folded sheet of paper had been found inside the jacket pocket. The police had photographed it, but had not shared a copy with the company. Watanabe placed it on the table. It contained a rough drawing of the tunnel. Sato had drawn 2 parallel lines for the walls. A vertical mark in the center represented the K-17 door. A second route extended from the doorway. It was not straight. The line curved around itself several times, formed loops, and eventually returned to its starting point. Sato had written several numbers beside it. A question mark followed the final number. It was the same value where the pointer on the metal box had stopped in the archive laboratory. Daniel asked whether police had seen the number before. Watanabe said they had not. A short Japanese note appeared near the bottom of the page. Tanaka translated it without software. It does not count meters, it counts decisions. Daniel asked him to repeat it. Tanaka spoke more slowly. It counts decisions. The phrase was not technical based on his reports. Sato had written with precision and avoided figurative language. Either he had lost the ability to think like an engineer, or he was trying to describe a process for which he had no better words. A laser rangefinder lay inside the rear compartment of the vehicle. The instrument was powered down, but its memory still held the last measurements. Watanabe gave Daniel a copy of the data. Sato had performed 27 scans on the day he disappeared. The first 6 were taken near the southern entrance. They ranged from 592.8 to 593.4 meters. The next values increased sharply. Then they began to fall. The final 3 measurements were identical, 17 meters. At first, Daniel assumed Sato had scanned a room or maintenance recess. Then he checked the timestamps. The final 3 readings had been recorded at 10-minute intervals. If Sato was facing a wall 17 meters away, he had remained in place for at least 20 minutes. The device had also recorded the direction of the beam. All 3 scans were taken straight ahead with almost no variation in angle. After that, the instrument was switched off. The timing matched Sato's final call to the office. Daniel asked to hear the recording. The company had previously claimed the calls were not stored. Police, however, had obtained a copy from the corporate system. The recording lasted 41 seconds. At first, only Sato's heavy breathing could be heard. Water dripped steadily in the background. He said he had found the central wall, even though it had been demolished 2 days earlier. Then he clarified that the wall was standing again. Someone was working behind it. The employee at the office told him to leave the tunnel. Sato replied that the exit was directly ahead. He remained silent for 7 seconds. Then he said, but it has been 17 meters away for 20 minutes. Near the end of the recording, there was an impact, not loud, more like a metal tool striking stone, then another and another. The sounds came from Sato's side of the call but seemed distant, as if the wall between him and the source was much thicker than it should have been. Sato spoke quietly. They reached me from the other side. The recording ended. Daniel removed the headphones. Eleanor sat beside him, examining the photographs of the vehicle. Her attention had settled on the dirt near the pedals. Sato's boots had been wet when he returned to the car. Their tread left a clear print on the rubber mat, but a second print marked the mat near the passenger seat. It was a different size, slightly shorter and much narrower. Police assumed it belonged to a colleague or one of the responding officers, however. The access record showed that no one sat in the passenger seat before the initial photography was completed. A second person might have been inside the vehicle with Sato. There were no cameras on the closed mountain road. No witnesses either. Watanabe showed them the final photograph from Sato's phone. It had been taken at 9:18 p.m., approximately 1 hour before his final call. The image showed the southern tunnel entrance. Rain was illuminated by the headlights of the vehicle. The metal gate stood open. One person wearing a safety helmet stood before the entrance. His back was turned toward the camera. Sato had arrived alone. The guard had left the post at 8 because of a landslide on a nearby road. No one else should have been present. Daniel enlarged the image. The helmet was pale. The figure was too far away for clothing or facial details to be identified, yet the posture seemed familiar. The unknown worker in the 1971 photographs had stood in the same way, motionless, between the photographer and the tunnel. Eleanor asked whether Sato's keys had been found. Watanabe said no. Daniel removed the long key marked K17. The detective recognized the key ring. A small red plastic tag still carried the vehicle number. The key had belonged to Sato. It had entered a sealed container and traveled from Japan to the archive. The engineer had not, before they left. Watanabe gave them a copy of the case file and asked to be informed about every object discovered inside the tunnel. He did not explain why. He only said that several local residents had seen light near the sealed southern entrance after Sato vanished. One had heard heavy machinery operating inside, although reconstruction had already been suspended when police arrived. The gate was locked. The lock was undamaged. No one was found inside. The tunnel was approximately 30 minutes from the police facility. The road climbed into the mountains through tight curves. A wet stone wall rose on one side. A steep slope hidden in mist fell away on the other. Traffic became sparse, then disappeared completely. Near the final turn, Tanaka stopped beside a temporary barrier. The road beyond was closed. They transferred into a Hoshin civil engineering vehicle. A company representative was waiting for them. Her name was Yuki Nakamura. Nakamura was younger than Daniel expected, barely over 30. She wore her dark hair short, thin-framed glasses, and a yellow safety jacket. She had replaced Sato after his disappearance. She did not hide the fact that she had never wanted the assignment. During the drive, Nakamura gave a brief summary of the latest work. The company had been hired to replace drainage, reinforce part of the masonry, and install a new camera system, while removing a technical wall. The workers discovered the recess containing the logs. After that, the measurement problems began. At first, the differences were only a few meters. The engineers blamed uneven surfaces and different methods. Then a camera mounted on a rail platform recorded 608 meters, while a laser scan measured 904. Nakamura personally checked the equipment. It was working correctly. She positioned two laser devices at the same time, one near the southern entrance and the other near the northern side. The southern device measured 904 meters. The northern one measured 593. 1 minute later, the values exchanged places. After that, Sato stopped the work. Management ordered him to continue. 3 days later, a worker disappeared. His name was Riku Hayashi. He was an electrician assigned to inspect a cable approximately 100 meters from the southern entrance. A camera recorded him entering at 10:12. 7 minutes later, Hayashi appeared on the camera at the northern entrance. The problem was not only the crossing time, the clock on the northern recording showed 10:09. He emerged 3 minutes before he entered. Hayashi had no memory of walking through the tunnel. He insisted that he reached the faulty light, turned back, and left through the same southern entrance. He did not recognize the northern post. He could not understand why his work vehicle was on the opposite side of the mountain. Hayashi failed to report for work the following day. His family found him at home, alive and physically unharmed. He was sitting in a dark room, drawing a tunnel plan across the wall when they tried to stop him. He repeated one sentence, "We have to return 3 minutes." Hayashi was now in a hospital. Daniel asked whether they could speak with him. Nakamura said the doctors would not permit visitors. He rarely reacted to people, but every evening at 10:09, he stood beside the door of his room and waited for 3 minutes, then he returned to bed. He did this whether or not he could see a clock. The vehicle stopped beside a temporary construction site. The tunnel stood ahead. Its southern entrance was cut into a stone hillside and framed with old masonry, partially covered by newer concrete sections. Wet branches hung over the arch, water ran down the walls, entered a drainage channel, and crossed the road. A metal gate was closed across the opening. Darkness began beyond it. Daniel knew the structure was an ordinary size, roughly 6 meters wide, high enough for small trucks. Yet the entrance seemed lower and narrower than it had in the photographs, not because of the construction, because of the hillside around it. The mountain appeared to press against the opening from every side. 2 security guards stood near the gate. Both remained outside beneath a shelter. Neither agreed to accompany the group inside. Nakamura opened a technical container and distributed equipment. Helmets, flashlights, radios, gas detectors, a safety rope, 4 body cameras, 2 laser rangefinders, a mechanical measuring wheel. Daniel asked that one device remain outside and continuously track a reflector carried by the group. Nakamura said they had already tried. The reading stopped making sense after 150 meters. The device continued to detect the reflector even when concrete walls inside the maintenance recesses stood between it and the entrance. The beam behaved as though the tunnel remained straight regardless of its actual geometry. Daniel insisted anyway. They secured the scanner beneath the shelter, mounted it on a heavy tripod, and synchronized every device. Eleanor checked the group. 4 people would enter: Daniel, Eleanor, Tanaka, Nakamura. 2 guards would remain outside. Daniel wrote the names on a paper card and attached it beside the gate. He remembered the photograph from 1927, 17 figures, 16 names before entering. They counted themselves aloud. 4. Nakamura opened the gate. Metal moved slowly along the track with a harsh, scraping sound. The first section of emergency lighting activated inside. The lamps cast cold, white light. Beyond them stretched a straight passage narrowing toward a small point of light. The northern exit. From that position, the tunnel looked short, ordinary. Daniel activated his body camera. At 3:42 p.m. they crossed the gate. The first several dozen meters were no different from any old transportation structure. The walls were wet. 2 narrow service rails ran beneath their feet. A drainage channel followed the right side. Lights and numbered section markers appeared at regular intervals. The air was colder than outside, but not stale. The ventilation system remained active at low power. Daniel heard the rain behind him for approximately 20 meters, then the sound disappeared, not gradually, all at once. As though the gate had closed, although it remained open, he looked back. The southern entrance was visible. Rain fell beyond it, the guards stood beneath the shelter, one watched the screen of the laser device. Daniel raised his radio, communication remained clear. The external scanner showed 23 meters, their measuring wheel showed 22.8, the difference was acceptable, they continued, every 25 meters. Nakamura marked the wall with chalk. Daniel photographed each mark, while Eleanor recorded the time at 50 meters. The instruments nearly agreed at 100, the laser showed 101.2, the wheel showed 99.7, travel time was slightly over 2 minutes. The southern exit behind them appeared to be at approximately the correct distance. The northern light ahead had grown slightly larger. At the 125-meter mark, Eleanor stopped. A white chalk line was already present on the left wall. Nakamura had not marked that location yet. The line was old and partially washed away by water. Someone had written 125 beside it. Nakamura said a previous crew might have left it. Daniel illuminated the wall from the side. Other numbers appeared beneath a newer layer of dust. All had been written in the same location, one over another, as though different people reached the same point while their instruments displayed different distances. They collected a chalk sample and continued. At 150 meters, the external laser reported 151. Their internal rangefinder, aimed back toward the gate, showed 149. The mechanical wheel showed 150. Everything was still normal. Daniel began to think the anomaly would not appear until they traveled deeper. Then Nakamura raised one hand. A person stood ahead, approximately 30 meters away. A pale safety helmet, a dark work jacket, his back facing them. Daniel had not seen the figure 1 second earlier. The corridor had been empty all the way to the exit. Tanaka identified himself in Japanese and asked the man to turn around. There was no response. The figure remained motionless. Eleanor ordered everyone to stay where they were. Daniel checked the zoom on his body camera. The image was unclear in the weak light, but the silhouette was being recorded. That meant it was not merely a personal observation. Nakamura contacted the guards. They confirmed that no one had entered after the group. The northern post was also sealed. There should have been 4 people inside. Daniel counted again. 4, a fifth stood ahead. He removed the paper card with the names: Daniel Carter, Eleanor Brooks, Hiroshi Tanaka, Yuki Nakamura. There were no others. The figure began to walk, not toward them, forward, toward the northern exit. His pace was slow. But the distance between them did not change. The man moved while remaining approximately 30 meters ahead. Daniel checked the measuring wheel. It rotated with every step they took. 155, 160, 170. The figure remained ahead. The exit beyond him did not move closer either. Eleanor ordered them to stop. All 4 stood still. The unknown worker took 3 more steps, then stopped as well. Daniel stepped backward. The figure did not move. He took another step toward the southern entrance. The man ahead copied him without turning. He stepped backward toward them while his body remained facing forward. Nakamura quietly said it was impossible. Daniel did not answer. He watched the figure's boots. They moved correctly, heel rising, toe pressing away from the ground. But the direction contradicted the posture. The man walked backward using the motion of someone walking forward. Eleanor ordered a retreat. They began moving toward the southern entrance while keeping the figure in sight. The measuring wheel reversed. 170, 160, 150. The distance to the southern light should have shortened, yet the exit behind them did not become larger. Daniel looked back for only a second. The white patch of the southern entrance remained unchanged. He checked the time. They had already been walking back for 3 minutes. At a normal pace, they should have been close to the gate. The outside team reported that the laser still showed 176 meters. Their reflector was not approaching. Daniel checked the internal rangefinder. The southern entrance was 43 meters away. The measuring wheel showed that they had traveled more than 100 meters back. The exterior device claimed they had not moved. 3 methods, 3 distances. A footstep sounded behind them. Daniel turned. The unknown worker was closer now, not 30 meters away, 20. He still faced away from them. Faded white writing was visible across his jacket. Daniel could not read the characters, but the fabric and cut did not resemble modern equipment. Nakamura noticed as well. She said that style of uniform had been used by construction crews during the 1970s. The figure took 1 backward step. The distance shortened by several more meters. It was not following them in the ordinary sense. It simply remained ahead of their route, even after the direction of that route changed. Eleanor moved the group against the wall. She removed 4 short ropes from her bag and connected their safety belts into one chain. Then she asked each person to state their name, the date, and the last event they remembered before entering. Daniel named the police garage and the photograph of Sato's vehicle. Eleanor named the gate and the card containing 4 names. Tanaka named his conversation with the guard. Nakamura named the external scanner test. Their memories agreed for now. Eleanor ordered them to switch off the internal rangefinders, not to look at the measuring wheel, not to count their steps, not to estimate the distance to the exit. She reminded them of the 1949 entry. Inside, it is impossible to determine how far you have traveled. Watch only the clock. They set a timer for 4 minutes and began walking toward the southern entrance, looking only at the floor several meters ahead. Daniel heard the footsteps of every member of the group, 4 rhythms, his own, Eleanor's slower pace, Nakamura's shorter steps, Tanaka's heavy boots. After several seconds, a 5th rhythm joined them. It came from behind, then a 6th. Ahead, Daniel did not look up. He watched the wet concrete and the rope connecting him to Eleanor. The timer continued, 3 minutes, 2, 1. During the final 10 seconds, the air became warmer. Daniel heard the rain again. When the alarm sounded, he looked up. The gate was only several steps away. They emerged at 3:55 p.m. according to their watches. 13 minutes had passed. The mechanical wheel recorded a total distance of 312 meters. The external laser claimed their maximum distance had been 176. The body cameras contained 21 minutes of video. Daniel checked the timestamp again. The recording began at 3:42. It ended at 4:03. Yet every watch showed 3:55. The cameras had experienced 8 more minutes than the people. The guards were certain the group had remained inside for approximately 20 minutes. One said he could see their lights almost the entire time. The other disagreed. He claimed the tunnel became completely dark after the first 2 minutes. They argued until Nakamura asked to review the exterior recording. The camera beside the gate showed 4 people entering at 3:42. At 3:49, Eleanor emerged from the tunnel. She approached the external scanner, looked at its screen, and returned inside. The real Eleanor had remained tied by rope to Daniel the entire time. She had never left the group. Her face was clearly visible on the recording. The same clothing, the same helmet. Even the small scratch on her right cheek caused by retrieving her bag from the aircraft compartment, the copy remained outside for 40 seconds. Neither guard noticed her after she returned to the tunnel. The recording continued normally at 3:55. The real group emerged. 4 people appeared on the video. Daniel, Eleanor, Tanaka, Nakamura. They stopped beside the gate. 5 seconds later, a 5th light appeared deep inside the tunnel. It moved slowly toward them. The guard on the recording closed the gate. The man himself did not remember doing so. He believed the gate remained open for several more minutes. The 5th light stopped behind the metal bars. No person holding it was visible, only a circular patch of light at the height of a human chest. Then it went dark. Daniel reviewed his body camera footage. The unknown worker in the pale helmet appeared on the recording. The camera captured more detail than Daniel had seen in person. Writing was visible on the back of the jacket. Hoshin Civil Engineering. Below it was a name, Naoki Sato. Nakamura said the jacket belonged to the missing engineer. It was the same one police had found wet inside his vehicle. Daniel returned to the frame where the figure approached. There was no glove on the man's left hand. A wide silver ring was visible on his ring finger. Watanabe had mentioned it in the missing person description. Sato wore a wedding band that police never found in the car or at his home. Eleanor asked Daniel to enlarge the face. The problem was that the man never turned around. They saw only the back of his head, the helmet, and the edge of one cheek. Daniel replayed the moment when the group began moving backward. In one frame, Sato stepped toward them while remaining turned away. His head was slightly inclined, not toward the exit, toward the left wall. The camera briefly captured what he had been facing. A narrow, dark vertical line appeared in the masonry. Daniel paused the recording. The next frame showed a gap several centimeters wide. 1 second later, a wooden surface had appeared. The K-17 door formed in the wall while they passed. None of them noticed it in person. The metal plate carried something besides the K-17 designation, a new number, the same number that appeared on the box. Daniel checked the timestamp, 3:49. That was the exact minute the copy of Eleanor left the tunnel and approached the external scanner. On Daniel's body camera, the real Eleanor stood beside him in front of the door. 2 versions of the same person occupied different points of the route at the same time. Daniel remembered Sato's note. It does not count meters, it counts decisions. At 3:49. Eleanor had 2 possible routes. She could remain with the group or return to the entrance and inspect the scanner. She chose the first. The tunnel displayed the second. Eleanor understood almost at the same moment. She said the additional distance might not come from physical expansion. The tunnel was adding the path a person could have traveled but did not. Every decision created another route. Under ordinary conditions, those routes never crossed. Inside K-17, they accumulated. Daniel looked at the doorway on the screen. 1,126 meters might not be the length of the tunnel. It might be the total of several possible paths at that moment. The external laser emitted a warning tone. The device remained aimed into the tunnel. Although Nakamura's reflector was resting on the table nearby, a new value appeared on the display, 17 meters. Everyone turned toward the gate beyond the metal bars. The tunnel appeared empty. The northern exit remained a distant white point. The laser claimed that a reflective surface stood 17 meters ahead. Nakamura directed her flashlight inside. There was nothing on the wet floor. Then the light moved across the left wall. A narrow wooden door stood 17 meters from the gate. It had not been there minutes earlier. A metal plate shone at its center. K-17, a number had been stamped beneath it. Daniel removed Sato's long key. The key became warm in his hand. A metal tool struck stone behind the door. Then again, a third time, the steady rhythm of construction work, as though someone on the other side was tunneling toward them. The door appeared 17 meters from the southern entrance. Daniel Carter had stood beside the same wall only minutes earlier. There had been no seam, recess, or trace of an old frame, only wet masonry, an emergency lighting cable, and a narrow stream of water moving slowly toward the drainage channel. Now a wooden door stood inside the stone. It looked as though it had always belonged to the tunnel. The dark wood had swollen from moisture. Rusted fastenings showed around the frame. The metal K-17 plate was scratched, but the number beneath it remained clear. Impacts continued behind the door. An even interval, metal against stone. A pause, another strike. It was not random water noise or structural movement. Someone was working on the opposite side. Eleanor Brooks ordered the guards to move away from the gate and remain near the external equipment. She did not want to increase the number of people close to the entrance. After the records from 1935, even the presence of another witness might alter what the tunnel considered a route. Hiroshi Tanaka checked the radios. Yuki Nakamura prepared the body cameras and placed 2 independent lamps beside the gate. One illuminated the door. The other faced the southern exit so they could see it without turning around. Daniel removed Sato's key. The warmth he had felt before was gone. The metal was cold again. The red plastic marker still carried the number of the company vehicle. Nakamura compared the key with an old photograph of Naoki Sato. In one image, he stood beside a technical container holding the same ring. There was no doubt the key belonged to the missing engineer. Daniel approached the door but did not stand directly in front of it. He positioned himself to one side so he would not be in the path if it opened suddenly. Eleanor repeated the rules. No one entered alone, no one separated. No one measured distance while moving. No one answered a voice unless its source was visible. Most importantly, no one made a decision silently. Every change of route had to be spoken aloud and confirmed by the entire group. If Sato was correct and the tunnel counted decisions, then an unspoken choice might create another path. Daniel inserted the key. It entered easily. When he turned it, the impact stopped, not gradually. At the exact same moment, only water and the weak hum of emergency lighting remained. Daniel opened the door several centimeters. There was no technical room behind it. Another tunnel continued beyond. The passage moved sideways at a right angle, then almost immediately curved until it ran parallel to the main gallery. Its walls were made from older, rougher masonry. There were no modern service rails on the floor. Instead, 2 narrow strips of rusted metal were partly buried in the stone. The lighting was uneven. Several modern Hoshin lamps, old glass fixtures from the middle of the 20th century. Bare bulbs attached to cloth-covered wires. Farther away, oil lanterns flickered. All of them burned at the same time. The air smelled of wet lime, machine grease, and smoke. Daniel noticed another odor, freshly broken stone. As though the work had stopped only seconds earlier, a pickaxe lay near the threshold. Its wooden handle was wet. Pale dust covered the metal head. Daniel did not touch it. Eleanor photographed the object from several angles. Nakamura inspected the frame from the main tunnel. It appeared fixed into the stone. From the K-17 side, it stood almost independently, as though it had been installed inside an opening that workers had not yet finished lining. The stones around it were fresh. Fingerprints remained in the mortar. Tanaka illuminated the wall. Dates appeared beneath the moisture. They had been scratched with different tools and in different hands, but all at nearly the same height. Someone had recently added another date beneath them. Eleanor checked the time. It was 4:11 p.m. She stated the group's decision aloud. They would enter only the first visible section, no farther than 20 meters beyond the doorway. The inspection would last 5 minutes. When the alarm sounded, they would return by the same route regardless of what they found. All four repeated the decision. Daniel crossed the threshold first. The sound changed immediately. The rain behind them became dull, as though the door did not lead into a side gallery but far beneath the mountain. Tanaka's radio briefly filled with static. The guard outside confirmed that he could still see them. Daniel looked back through the open door. The main tunnel, the gate, and daylight beyond remained visible. The distance appeared correct, 17 meters. They took several steps. The floor of K-17 was uneven in some places. The stone looked old and polished by years of boots. Elsewhere, fresh rubble covered the ground. On the right wall, Daniel saw a row of metal hooks. A modern yellow helmet hung from the first. An old leather safety cap hung from the second. A cloth head covering used by workers before modern helmets became common hung from the third. All were wet. Boots stood beneath them, different sizes, different periods, some nearly new, others collapsing from age. Eleanor did not allow anyone to touch them. Nakamura moved her camera closer to the modern helmet. A name was written on the inner strap. Riku Hayashi, the electrician who emerged from the northern side 3 minutes before entering. Hayashi's helmet should have been stored in a company equipment container. Nakamura had personally seen it after the incident. She contacted the outside team and asked them to check. A guard answered 1 minute later. Hayashi's helmet was still there, through his camera. They saw a yellow helmet with the same scratch near its edge. 2 identical helmets existed at the same time, one outside, one inside K-17. Daniel did not consider it a duplicate in the ordinary sense. The scratch matched, but the strap in the gallery showed heavier wear. The plastic had lost its shine, as though the helmet had been used for several additional years. The object had not simply been copied, it had another history. Farther inside stood a small wooden table. A Hashin civil engineering log rested on it beside a portable radio and a cup of unfinished tea. Steam still rose from the cup. Daniel stopped the group. No one could have been there before them. The door had appeared less than 10 minutes earlier. Yet the tea remained hot. Eleanor photographed the log without touching its cover. It carried the following day's date. Daniel checked twice. August 2, 2026. Today was the first. The open page contained a crew list: Daniel Carter, Eleanor Brooks, Hiroshi Tanaka, Yuki Nakamura. A fifth name was unreadable. Water had spread the ink. The starting time was listed as 4:11 p.m. The completion time was 6:47 p.m. Daniel checked his watch. Only 3 minutes had passed. A short English entry appeared below. The handwriting resembled Daniel's. First section safe. We decided to continue. Daniel had not written it. He had not touched the journal, yet the letters were familiar. That was how he formed a capital D. That was how he connected the R and S in the word first. Eleanor told him not to study the page any longer. If the text described a decision they had not yet made, reading it might influence their choice. She repeated the original plan aloud. 5 minutes. No farther than 20 meters. Return regardless of what they found. Everyone confirmed. The radio on the table switched on. Nakamura's voice came through the speaker. The recording was quiet and distorted by static, but the words were clear. She was asking them not to return to the door. Then Daniel's voice replied that the door was gone. Eleanor spoke next. She ordered everyone to remain still and not look back. The recording ended. The real Nakamura said nothing. Daniel checked the radio. It was an old analog model with no recording function. The dial was set to the group's frequency. Tanaka contacted the external post. The guard heard him normally. There were no other voices in the channel. Eleanor concluded that the device was not reproducing the current transmission. It was receiving another version of the conversation, possible or future. The timer showed 90 seconds remaining. They started back. Daniel walked last so he could see every member of the group. The door remained open. Beyond it were the main tunnel and the light of the southern entrance. The distance seemed greater, not 17 meters. Closer to 30. Daniel did not voice the estimate. He remembered the warning against measuring the route mentally. Impacts began inside the right wall, not ahead, directly beyond the masonry. Metal struck stone in time with their movement, one impact for each of Daniel's steps. He stopped. The impacts stopped. Daniel moved again. The sound continued. Someone was working at exactly the speed he walked. Nakamura raised her flashlight. A narrow crack formed in the mortar between stones. With each strike, it grew longer. Eleanor ordered them not to stop. Something shifted behind the crack. Several stones pushed inward. A dark gap opened between them. Daniel saw light on the other side. Another tunnel ran beyond the wall. A group of 4 people moved through it. Daniel, Eleanor, Tanaka, Nakamura, they traveled parallel to the real group only several meters away, separated by the stone wall. Their clothing and equipment matched. But the copies appeared exhausted. Daniel's jacket was torn at the shoulder. Nakamura's helmet lamp was dead. Tanaka supported Eleanor by one arm. They did not look sideways. They did not notice the real group. The second Daniel carried a log, the same one from the table. The other Eleanor suddenly stopped. The real Eleanor continued walking. Several seconds later, the second group passed beyond the edge of the crack. The impacts ended. The stones slowly shifted back into place and closed the opening. Daniel said nothing until they reached the threshold. The timer sounded. They stepped into the main tunnel. The guards remained beside the gate. The southern exit was open. Rain continued to fall. Daniel checked the time. For 16 exactly 5 minutes had passed. The body cameras also showed 5 minutes. For the first time, every clock agreed. Eleanor did not allow the door to be closed immediately. They needed to record the first section from the main tunnel. Nakamura mounted a camera on a tripod and aimed it through the opening. The screen showed no table, no helmets, no mixed lighting from different periods. Behind the door was a short, unfinished passage. Approximately 6 meters long, ending at a solid stone wall. Daniel looked inside directly. He still saw the long gallery. The table remained. Steam continued rising from the tea. The camera saw something else. Eleanor asked Tanaka to describe the space. He saw a long tunnel but no table. Nakamura saw rails leading to a dark metal partition. 4 observers, 3 different views. Daniel checked the photograph he had taken inside. It showed the table and log. Eleanor's photograph showed only an empty floor. Nakamura's recording showed 2 tables placed one behind the other. Every device also captured its own version. K-17 did not hide objects. It showed different routes to different observers. Daniel closed the door. The key turned with difficulty. When the lock clicked, the number on the plate changed. 17 disappeared, 38 replaced it. The external laser immediately emitted a tone. The door was now 38 meters away. Physically, it had not moved. Daniel took several steps toward the gate. The door appeared to retreat. He stopped. The distance between him and K-17 was now almost 20 meters, although he had moved only 3. Eleanor ordered everyone outside without looking back. They crossed the gate. When Daniel turned, the door was gone. Only an ordinary wall remained 17 meters from the entrance. The laser showed 593 meters to the northern exit. The rain began to weaken. Inside the temporary container, Nakamura copied every recording onto separate drives. Eleanor required each member to describe what they had seen before reviewing anyone else's material. The differences were larger than expected. Daniel saw 3 helmets. Eleanor saw 5. Tanaka claimed there were many hooks, but all were empty. Nakamura saw only 1 helmet, her own. Daniel heard the radio broadcast their voices. Eleanor heard only breathing. Tanaka heard a Japanese children's song. Nakamura heard Naoki Sato reciting numbers. All 4 saw the log dated tomorrow, but the text differed in Daniel's version. The group decided to continue. Eleanor read, "We closed the door." They remained inside. Tanaka saw only the list of names. Nakamura's journal said, "Sato returned, but he did not recognize me." Daniel opened the recording from his body camera. It confirmed his version almost completely. The table, the cup, the log, the radio, the parallel group behind the crack, but one detail did not match his memory. When the second Eleanor stopped behind the wall, she turned her head. Daniel was certain the copies had not seen them. On the recording, Eleanor looked directly through the crack at the real Daniel. Her lips moved. There was no sound. Lip-reading software produced an approximate result. Do not let her open the second door. Daniel replayed the frame several times. The copy did not clarify which Eleanor she meant, or where the second door was at that moment. One of the guards brought them the paper card listing the group. Daniel had attached it beside the gate before the first entry. The card now contained 5 names: Daniel Carter, Eleanor Brooks, Hiroshi Tanaka, Yuki Nakamura, Naoki Sato. The handwriting on the 5th line belonged to Daniel. He did not remember writing it. The ink was still fresh. Eleanor compared the card with the preparation footage before entry. It clearly showed only 4 names. The 5th line appeared while they were beyond the K-17 door. The gate camera captured the change. At 4:13, the space below Nakamura's name was blank. At 4:14, Sato's name was present. No one approached the card. During the same minute, something else changed on the recording. A person stood beside the external scanner, a pale helmet, a Hashin jacket back to the camera. Sato was looking into the tunnel. The guards did not notice him. He remained still for approximately 20 seconds. Then he raised one hand and touched the wall beside the gate. A vertical dark line appeared in the stone. Another door, it formed outside the tunnel. Sato opened it and went inside. Then the door vanished. Daniel paused the footage. The second warning had already come true. While the real group investigated the internal gallery, another route opened beside the entrance. They did not know where it led, but someone resembling Sato had used it. Nakamura stared at the screen. Then she said the recording contained an error. Sato stood to the left of the scanner. There was no stone wall there. A technical container stood in that position. Daniel replayed the footage. She was correct. The container was gone. In its place stood an old stone arch that did not exist at the site. The camera had recorded another version of the external space. K-17 was no longer limited to the tunnel. It had begun adding routes around the entrance. Eleanor ordered the immediate evacuation of the southern site. Both guards, the technicians, and the driver moved behind the road barrier. The equipment remained, except for the cameras and data drives. They waited inside a service vehicle as the rain weakened. At 5:02, the clouds began to separate. At 5:11, the rain stopped. Daniel watched the tunnel through the camera zoom. The entrance remained still. No doors, no lights inside. The external scanner, left beneath the shelter, continued operating. Its readings gradually decreased. Then it stopped. Nakamura's phone rang. The call came from the hospital where Riku Hayashi was being treated. The doctor spoke quickly. Tanaka translated for Daniel and Eleanor. At 4:11, Hayashi had left his bed. It was not his usual time. He approached the wall beside his room door and began striking it with a metal spoon. Impact, pause, impact. The same rhythm they heard behind K-17. The staff removed the spoon. Hayashi continued with his fist. He stopped at 4:16, exactly 5 minutes later. Then he spoke for the first time in several days. They opened the correct door but returned by the wrong route. Daniel felt Eleanor tense beside him. They had used the same threshold, walked through the same gallery, followed the time limit, yet the tunnel might define a route not by geography but by a sequence of decisions. Inside, they had seen a version of themselves that continued, then they decided to return. Perhaps that choice created another path. Hayashi added one more sentence. Now one of them remembers a road the others did not walk. After that, he stopped responding again. Eleanor asked everyone to describe the route from the door to the table. Daniel remembered 6 lamps. Tanaka remembered 4. Nakamura remembered 7. Eleanor said she had not counted. Daniel asked what she remembered instead. She remained silent for several seconds. Then she said there had been another door behind the table. It stood in the far wall. Dark metal marked K-17. No one else had seen it. Eleanor had not mentioned it inside because it was beyond the permitted 20 meters. She decided to ignore it. Daniel remembered the moving lips of the other Eleanor. Do not let her open the second door. He asked whether Eleanor had wanted to approach it. She answered honestly, yes, not because she lost control. She was convinced Naoki Sato was behind the metal door. She heard him saying her name. Daniel heard no voice, neither did Tanaka or Nakamura. Eleanor chose not to approach, but the tunnel might preserve the route in which she chose differently. Somewhere inside K-17, another Eleanor might already be opening it. The group did not return to the tunnel that evening. They stayed in a small hotel 40 minutes from the site. Eleanor ordered that no one remain alone. Daniel and Tanaka took neighboring rooms. Nakamura's room faced Eleanor's. 2 portable cameras were installed in the corridor. Everyone carried a paper card listing their name and last shared memories. At 10:30 p.m., Daniel completed a preliminary report. He described 5 working rules for K-17. First, the anomaly does not alter a single space. It creates or opens several possible versions of a route. Second, different people and devices may observe different versions of the same location. Third, an unchosen path does not disappear. It may continue as a separate route. Fourth, objects and people from different routes can occasionally cross between them. Fifth, rain increases the number of available paths or makes their intersection easier. Daniel did not know whether the rules were correct, but they explained most of the documented events. Cameras recorded 600 meters, lasers measured 900, workers walked for an hour. Each method might be measuring a different route. Missing workers were not necessarily trapped in an endless tunnel. They might have completed their journey in a version where the exit existed somewhere else. At another time, or behind another door, near midnight, Daniel woke to knocking, 3 evenly spaced impacts. He sat up. The sound did not come from his room door. It came from the wall beside the window. Impact, pause. Impact. Daniel switched on the light. A narrow vertical crack had appeared in the wallpaper. It stretched from the floor to shoulder height. Daniel did not approach. He called Eleanor. She answered immediately. There was knocking in her room as well, not from the wall, from inside the wardrobe. Tanaka reported impacts beneath the floor. Nakamura heard nothing. Instead, Riku Hayashi's yellow helmet had appeared in her bathroom. Wet, old, worn as though it had been used for several more years. Someone had written a new date on the inner strap. August 2, 2026, tomorrow. Beneath the date was one sentence: do not enter from the southern side. Daniel looked at the crack in his wall. It was no longer only a line. A dark wooden frame was forming around its edges. K-17 was not waiting for them to return to the tunnel. It was building a route to them. The wooden frame in the hotel wall disappeared at 12:17 a.m. It did not dissolve or collapse. It simply stopped being part of the room between two heartbeats. Only a narrow dark line remained on the wallpaper, easy to mistake for moisture. Daniel Carter photographed the wall, recorded the time, and did not touch it. Seconds later, a door opened in the corridor. Eleanor Brooks stepped out of her room fully dressed. She carried a tablet in one hand and a small emergency light in the other. Hiroshi Tanaka appeared almost at the same time. He studied the floor in front of him as if expecting to find a seam or hatch in the carpet. Yuki Nakamura brought Riku Hayashi's yellow helmet inside a transparent evidence bag. Water still ran from its edges. The writing remained on the inner strap. August 2, 2026, do not enter from the southern side. No one suggested waiting until morning. The warning was specific enough to alter their plan, but not clear enough to guarantee safety. The northern entrance might be the correct route, or it might be the choice K-17 wanted them to make. Eleanor gathered everyone in her room. They did not use the hotel telephone. They did not switch on the television. They did not open the wardrobe where the earlier knocking had come from. Daniel arranged the evidence across the table. The card containing 5 names, the photograph of Sato near the southern entrance, the 1927 plan, the image of the K-17 door marked 17, the frame showing another version of Sato beside the external scanner. Eleanor placed 4 blank cards beside them. Each person separately wrote what they believed the next correct action should be. It was not a vote. They wanted to know whether one possible route was already influencing them. Daniel wrote, inspect the northern entrance from outside. Do not enter before dawn. Tanaka wrote, check the northern post and camera. Nakamura wrote, contact the hospital. Ask Hayashi about the northern side. Eleanor wrote, travel to the northern entrance before the weather changes. 3 answers proposed gathering information. Only Eleanor wanted to approach the tunnel immediately. She stared at her card for a long time. Then she said she did not remember deciding to write it. She remembered the movement of the pen. She remembered the words, but between Daniel's question and the first line, there had been no internal choice. The answer had seemed to be waiting. Daniel lifted the card with forceps and sealed it separately. An indented word appeared on the back. It had not been written in ink. The letters were pressure marks from another sheet that had never been on the table. North. Tanaka contacted the hospital. Riku Hayashi was awake. At 12:17, he had left his bed again, approached the door, and asked the nurse to move him into a room with windows facing north. When she refused, he said, then they will go without the map. The doctor allowed Tanaka a brief conversation over speakerphone. Hayashi did not respond to the greeting. Daniel heard only quiet breathing and the hospital ventilation. Tanaka asked what would happen if they entered from the northern side. The silence lasted nearly 20 seconds, then Hayashi spoke. The northern entrance leads back. Tanaka asked him to explain. Hayashi repeated, it leads back, but not outside. Another sound came through the speaker, paper moving, someone was turning pages. The nurse said there were no books in the room. Hayashi quietly read a date, November 14th, 1927. It was the date of the final entry in the original construction journal. Daniel pulled the copied page closer. That was the entry stating that the K-17 door stood 417 meters from both entrances at the same time. Hayashi continued, they did not seal the door, they sealed the decision. His voice was flat and almost emotionless. One crew wanted to connect the tunnels. The other wanted to close the passage. Both orders were completed. Since then, the route has always tried to finish both jobs. Eleanor asked who had told him this. Hayashi did not answer immediately. The man who returns last. The connection ended. The doctor called back 1 minute later. Hayashi had returned to bed and stopped speaking. A sheet of old paper had appeared on the floor beside him. It contained a drawing of the northern entrance. 2 human figures stood in the passage. One entered. The other came out walking backward. At 1:05 a.m., Eleanor made the decision. They would not enter the tunnel at night. They would inspect the northern site before dawn but remain outside the gate. All further action would depend on comparing recordings and confirming the group. The decision was repeated aloud. 4 people, 4 names. Naoki Sato was not a member of the group. They traveled in 2 vehicles. Tanaka drove ahead with Nakamura. Daniel and Eleanor followed in the second car. The radios remained open every 5 minutes. Each person stated their name, the time, and the last turn they all remembered. The sky was dry. The storm clouds had moved east, but the asphalt still reflected light and heavy drops fell from the trees. The northern entrance lay on the opposite slope. The direct distance between the sites was small, but the road curved around the ridge and required nearly 40 minutes. After 27 minutes, Daniel noticed that they had passed the same abandoned vending machine twice. It stood beside a concrete retaining wall. The red body had faded, and the lower glass was broken. Eleanor recognized it as well. The navigation display showed the car moving forward. The odometer continued to increase. Tanaka reported by radio that he could not see the vending machine. His vehicle was already 3 kilometers ahead. Daniel slowed down. The machine appeared again after the next turn. This time, a person wearing a pale helmet stood beside it. His back faced the road. Daniel did not stop. Eleanor activated the camera and recorded the figure through the side window. As the car passed, the man turned his head. His face remained hidden under the helmet's shadow, but the silver wedding band on his raised hand reflected the headlights. Sato did not point forward. He indicated a narrow service road branching to the left. It did not appear on the map. Daniel stayed on the main route. 1 minute later, Tanaka's radio activated. He asked why they had turned. Daniel answered that they had not. Tanaka could see their taillights on the service road below the slope. He even read the vehicle number. Eleanor looked into the right mirror. A second car moved through the trees below. The same model, the same number. Daniel sat behind its wheel. Eleanor sat beside him. The duplicate vehicle traveled toward the mountain and disappeared behind a concrete wall where no tunnel existed. The real car remained on the main road. Eleanor ordered them not to discuss the alternate route before arrival. Naming a possibility might turn it into another accepted decision. 10 minutes later, they caught up with Tanaka's vehicle. The northern site was smaller than the southern one. There were no temporary containers, only a narrow space between the slope and the road, an old shelter, and a metal gate. The lamps above the entrance did not work. The stone arch appeared older. Almost none of it had been covered by new concrete. A faded Japanese sign above it warned of limited clearance. The gate was secured with a chain. The transportation seal remained intact. Tanaka checked the camera. It was recording, but its internal clock was 3 minutes slow. The same 3 minutes by which Hayashi emerged before entering. Daniel examined the ground. Wet footprints marked the area near the gate. One person had approached from the road, stopped before the entrance, then walked back. But the toes pointed toward the tunnel in both directions. The person had returned backward. One print contained a distinctive break in the tread pattern. Watanabe had photographed the same mark inside Sato's vehicle. Nakamura found a dark fiber on the chain. It matched the material of a Hoshin work jacket. Sato had been there after the site closed, or one of his routes had. Eleanor asked to review the night recording. At 11:48 p.m., the gate was empty. At 11:49, Sato was standing in front of it. The camera did not record his approach. He appeared between frames. His back faced the lens while he looked into the tunnel. At 11:52, the engineer raised one hand and touched the metal bars. Lights activated behind the gate, not modern electric lamps, oil lanterns. They extended into the passage at even intervals. Sato stepped forward. The chain and gate remained in place. His body passed through the metal without visible resistance. At 11:53, he disappeared into the darkness. At 11:56, another person appeared, Eleanor Brooks. She walked out of the tunnel, passed through the locked gate, and stopped before the camera. This Eleanor looked older, not by years, perhaps only by several difficult days. Dark circles marked her eyes. A bandage covered her left hand. Stone dust covered her clothing. She looked directly into the lens, then raised a sheet of paper. In English it read, "Do not let Daniel remember the room." The real Eleanor paused the recording. Daniel felt the other three looking at him. He remembered no room except the technical space in the 1998 photograph and the gallery containing the table. Eleanor asked whether he had seen anything else during their first entry. Daniel said no, it was true. At first, when he repeated the answer internally, a brief image appeared in his memory. A circular concrete chamber. A table holding a mechanical measuring instrument. Walls covered with vertical marks, 2 doors facing one another. The image was so clear that Daniel briefly smelled machine oil. He did not know where the memory came from. He reported it honestly. Eleanor ordered him not to recover further detail. The more he remembered, the stronger the route belonging to that memory might become. Nakamura continued the recording. The older Eleanor lowered the paper. Light appeared behind her in the tunnel. She looked back. Daniel emerged from the darkness. His clothing was clean. He wore no helmet. 3 journals from 1927 rested in his arms. The duplicate Daniel approached Eleanor but did not look at her. His attention remained on the camera. His lips formed the words, "She already remembers." Then both figures stepped backward and disappeared behind the gate. At 12:17, A vertical dark line formed across the camera itself. The image ended. That was the moment the door frames appeared in the hotel. Eleanor closed the file. Only one conclusion was certain. One possible route had already brought them to the northern entrance on that route. Daniel obtained the journals, and Eleanor experienced something she tried to warn her present self about. Everything else remained uncertain. Detective Watanabe arrived after dawn. He brought copies of Sado's medical records, photographs from his apartment, and personal items recovered after the disappearance. One was a pocket audio recorder. Police had not found it in the vehicle. It appeared inside Sado's mailbox 4 days after he vanished. The building camera did not record who delivered it. The recorder contained 11 files. The first 9 were technical notes. The 10th held 40 minutes of footsteps and heavy breathing. The 11th had been created after the disappearance. Its date was August 4, 2026, 2 days in the future. The recording began with Sado's voice. He spoke English, selecting his words slowly. If you found this, the northern route has opened. There was a pause. Do not try to bring me out through the same route. The person who returns is not always the person who entered. Sado explained that a place existed inside K-17 which the 1927 builders called the measurement chamber. It did not measure the tunnel's length. It distributed it. When the two crews excavated from opposite sides, their coordinates matched, but the passages did not meet. Both occupied the same point while belonging to different conclusions of the work. One crew was ordered to continue excavation. The other was told to stop and seal the wall. The measurement chamber formed between those decisions. It stored the additional distance required for both orders to be considered complete. Daniel listened twice. The tunnel was not simply a spatial anomaly. It behaved like a system that refused to cancel any completed decision. A left turn remained a route. A right turn that was considered but never taken might also survive inside K-17. The more decisions people made, the greater the combined length became. Sado continued. The chamber always has 2 doors. One leads to the route you used. The other leads to the route you could have used. The recording quality worsened. Tool impacts began in the background to bring someone back. You must choose which version of the path is real. The other routes do not disappear. They lose their exits. Then Sado gave a rule that did not appear in the journals. Never allow a person to choose their own door. Daniel understood the reason almost immediately. Each person would believe the route they remembered was the real one, but the memory might belong to a different version from the body standing before them. Sado coughed on the recording. The one who returns with the wrong memories is not a copy. He is real. He is simply real for another route. He then spoke about Masao Ishikawa, the only member of the 1998 team who returned. Ishikawa was not lying when he claimed they emerged from the northern side after 25 minutes on his route. They had, on another, 3 people remained inside the technical room. On another, Ishikawa returned alone through the southern entrance. That was the version recorded by the camera. His body and memory completed different paths. Since then, he had lived with the memories of a man who emerged elsewhere. Daniel wrote down the phrasing, "Body and memory can belong to different routes." It explained the 1944 line, "They returned with the correct names, but not the correct memories," near the end. Sado addressed Eleanor directly. "You will see me at the northern gate. Do not ask whether I am Naoki Sado. Ask who remained inside the room." Then he added, "If I answer, Daniel, do not open the gate." The recording ended with metal striking stone. Watanabe checked the metadata. The file genuinely carried a future date. The recorder's clock could not be altered without connecting it to a computer. No such connection had occurred after Sado disappeared. At 6:42 a.m., the sun rose above the slope. Direct light did not reach the entrance. But the sky brightened. The night mist began to disperse. The northern tunnel remained dark. Eleanor established a new plan. They would not open the gate fully. First, they would send in a remote platform with cameras, then compare its route with the stationary recording and laser scan. No one would enter until they knew whether the northern path actually led to the measurement chamber. Nakamura brought a small rail cart from the southern site. They installed 2 cameras, a lamp, a laser reflector, and a mechanical wheel. They removed the chain. The gate opened only far enough to admit the platform at 7:10. The cart crossed the threshold. For the first 50 meters, every instrument agreed the camera showed an ordinary tunnel. The wheel showed 49.8 meters. The external laser showed 50.1. At 70 meters, the image began to fall behind the telemetry. The platform moved, the wheel rotated, but the lamps in the video remained in the same positions. It looked as though the cart stood still while the floor moved beneath it. At 100 meters, the camera recorded a person. Naoki Sado stood in the center of the track, facing the lens. It was the first clear image of his face since the disappearance. He looked exhausted, his cheeks were hollow. Stubble covered his jaw, his left hand was bare and the wedding band remained on his finger. His clothing matched the day he vanished. But the jacket was clean. Sato raised one hand, signaling them to stop. Nakamura switched off the motor. The mechanical wheel stopped at 103 meters, the laser showed 417 on the screen. Sato stood less than 10 meters from the camera. He approached. The platform radio did not transmit sound, but the camera microphone worked. Sato spoke in English. "You came earlier." Eleanor activated the speaker. She did not ask his name, who remained in the room. Sato lowered his eyes. For several seconds he resembled someone trying to remember a long-practiced password. Then he answered. Eleanor. Daniel felt relief, but Eleanor's expression did not change. The recording had warned only against the answer Daniel. That did not make every other answer safe. Eleanor asked which Eleanor. Sato looked directly into the camera, the one who opened the second door. A metal surface formed on the wall beside him, first as a shadow, then as a door. K17, the plate showed 417. Sato touched the handle but did not open it. "She thinks she is rescuing me," he said. "She is keeping the chamber open." Daniel asked where the measurement room was. Sato pointed beyond the door, in every place where two correct routes cannot exist together. He spoke calmly, but continued looking slightly to the left of the camera. As if another person stood beside the platform, Eleanor asked who he could see. Sato answered. Daniel. The real Daniel stood outside beside the monitor. Sato continued. "He came with you. You cannot see him because you have not decided to enter yet." Daniel remembered the second vehicle on the service road. The other version of himself in the camera footage. The circular room he should not remember. A possible Daniel was already traveling the northern route. Eleanor ordered Sato not to open the door. He smiled bitterly. "I have been refusing for 11 days. Exactly 11 days had passed since he vanished. Sato believed he had spent all that time beside the same door. Nakamura asked whether he could approach the exit. Sato shook his head. "I tried. Each time the one who made another choice came out." He indicated his clothing. One returned to the car. One left the key, one called the office, one went to the northern entrance. "I remember all of them." Daniel understood why Sato looked exhausted. He did not merely carry someone else's memory. He had accumulated the memories of multiple versions of the same night. Sato moved close to the camera. "Do not enter as 4. Eleanor asked why. "Because 4 are already inside." Lights came on behind him. Figures appeared in the depth of the tunnel. 4 people approached Sato. Daniel, Eleanor, Tanaka, Nakamura. Their clothing was covered with dust. Daniel carried the journals. Eleanor held her left arm against her body. It was the group from the night recording. Sato looked back. "They did not return for you." One figure quickened her pace. The older Eleanor. She stared at the platform, at the real Eleanor beyond the camera. Sato grabbed the cart and pushed it backward. The image shook. The platform rolled toward the exit without its motor. The mechanical wheel reversed. The external laser continued, showing 417. On the video, Sato and the door did not recede. They remained roughly 10 meters away even as the cart moved backward. The older Eleanor approached him. She carried a sheet of paper. The same paper shown to the night camera. Daniel could not read it from the angle. The duplicate Eleanor offered it to Sato. He refused to take it. She spoke, but heavy interference swallowed the words. Then the real Eleanor's voice came through the platform speaker, although she was silent. "Open the door." Sato covered his ears. The older Eleanor repeated the same words. The real Eleanor immediately disabled the speaker. The voice continued, from inside the tunnel, from every lamp, from Tanaka's radio, from Nakamura's phone. "Open the door." Daniel disconnected the platform's power. The screen should have gone dark. The image remained. Sato stood before the camera. Behind him, the older Eleanor placed her hand on the K17 handle. The number 417 changed. The total distance from the door to both entrances in the 1927 record. Sato turned toward the camera. "They are making both choices again." The older Eleanor pressed the handle. The door opened. A circular concrete room stood beyond. Daniel recognized it. A mechanical measuring instrument occupied the center. A second door stood opposite. Thousands of vertical marks covered the walls. Sato moved aside, giving the camera a clearer view. People sat across the floor. Dozens of them, workers in clothing from different periods. Some held helmets in their laps. Others stared at the 2 doors. They were not injured and did not look dead. They were waiting. Daniel saw the 3 missing members of the 1998 expedition. Kenji Morita from the 1949 log. Engineers wearing uniforms from 1927. The missing had not been wandering an endless tunnel. They remained in the measurement chamber because no route could finally decide through which door they should leave. The older Eleanor stepped inside. Sato tried to stop her. She turned sharply. Her expression did not show fear, it showed certainty. She believed she already knew the correct decision. Daniel suddenly remembered more, not a fragment, a full sequence. He had stood in this room. 3 journals rested in his arms. Eleanor argued with Sato beside the second door. Tanaka checked the names of the missing. Nakamura turned the scale on the mechanical device. Daniel heard his own voice. We have to return the length to 0. The memory did not belong to the present Daniel, but he knew what happened next. Nakamura set the scale to 0. The first door vanished. The people in the room began forgetting where they came from. The second door opened into a tunnel that had not existed before. Daniel carried the journals through it. Eleanor remained behind. That was why her older version warned them not to let Daniel remember the room. His memory led toward a decision that had already failed. Daniel stepped away from the screen. He reported the memory. Eleanor ordered everyone not to touch the equipment or repeat any action from the observed route. On the monitor, the older Eleanor entered the room. She turned toward the camera and raised the paper. The writing was now visible. Do not reset the length. Then she closed the K-17 door from inside. The image disappeared. The platform lost its signal. The mechanical wheel stopped at 0. The external laser showed 593 meters. Darkness returned to the tunnel for several seconds. No one spoke. Then footsteps came from beyond the northern gate. Slow, human. Someone was approaching the exit. Daniel counted the rhythm. 1 person. A figure appeared behind the bars after approximately 1 minute. Naoki Sato. He walked normally, facing them without a helmet. Dust covered his jacket. The wedding band remained on his left hand. Sato stopped before the locked gate. Only metal bars separated him from the group. Eleanor moved closer but did not touch the lock. She repeated the question, who remained in the room. Sato looked at Daniel, then Eleanor. Everyone who still believes they have only one exit. The answer did not match the recording. Daniel did not know whether that was a good sign. Sato raised his hand. His palm passed between the bars. He was physically present, not an image, not a shadow. Eleanor asked the date. August 2nd. It was August 2, shortly after 7 in the morning. Correct. Tanaka asked how much time had passed since he vanished. 11 days, correct. Nakamura asked for his last memory before entering. Sato said he left his vehicle near the southern road, took the rangefinder, and walked into the tunnel during rain. He remembered the true beginning of the route. Eleanor asked one final question, which entrance did you just return through? Sato answered without hesitation, the southern entrance. He stood at the northern side. His body had returned through one route, his memory through another. Eleanor did not open the gate. Sato understood why. He did not argue, he only asked for paper. Daniel passed a notebook through the bars. Sato drew a circle. 2 doors opposite each other, a mechanical device between them. Then he drew lines from both entrances to the room. They cannot simply be closed, he said. As long as 2 incompatible orders exist, the chamber will preserve both routes. On the upper line, he wrote, connect. On the lower, seal the original decisions from 1927. Daniel asked how they could be cancelled. Sato shook his head. A decision cannot be cancelled, it can be completed so both routes have the same result. Eleanor understood first. The builders had tried to open and close the path at the same time to end the anomaly. They needed an action that fulfilled both orders without contradiction, connect the tunnels, and make K-17 impassable. Not with a wall, not with a door. By changing the route itself, Sato confirmed it. The measurement chamber contained a mechanism that distributed the additional length between passages, if adjusted correctly. It could connect both entrances through one straight route and lock all accumulated extra distance inside the parallel gallery with no exit. K-17 would remain, but it would no longer intersect the main tunnel. The missing people would receive one shared exit. Daniel asked why the older Eleanor warned them not to set the scale to 0. 0 does not erase the tunnel, Sato said. It erases the difference between routes. People emerge, but their memories combine. After several days, they begin returning to the door. That was what happened to Hayashi. Perhaps it was what happened to the workers in 1944. 0 was not the correct value. The mechanism needed the original main length, 593 meters. The additional 311 meters of parallel gallery had to be isolated beyond the second door. Together, they totaled 904. But the distribution had to remain 593 and 311, not one endlessly changing length. Daniel studied the 1927 plan for the first time. The numbers made sense both mathematically and logically. The main route received a stable exit. The extra gallery became a sealed compensating section. Both original orders were fulfilled. The tunnels were connected. The unknown passage was closed. One problem remained. Someone would have to enter the measurement chamber and alter the mechanism. Sato said the northern route was shorter, but it led backward. A person entering from the north first encountered the path of their own return. That was why people walked backward in photographs. Why Sato had been seen before he disappeared. The northern route displayed the consequence before the choice. Daniel asked whether Sato had seen them succeed. The engineer remained silent for a long time. I saw a route where the tunnel became 593 meters, and the people most came out. The word most remained between them. Eleanor did not ask who failed to return. That might transform an uncertain result into a defined route. She stated the next decision carefully. The group would not enter until preparation was complete. They would create one written plan with no alternate choices inside. Each person would have one action, no improvised changes, no voting after crossing the gate. Sato would remain behind the bars until the entry began, not as a prisoner, as a control point. If his answers or behavior changed, another route had already intersected theirs. Sato agreed. They passed him water and a thermal blanket. He sat beside the wall without moving away from the gate. Daniel wrote the names on a new card. Daniel Carter, Eleanor Brooks, Hiroshi Tanaka, Yuki Nakamura, Naoki Sato, external control point, 5 names, 5 defined roles. While Nakamura prepared the equipment, Daniel reviewed the night recording of the older Eleanor in the final frame before she closed the door. The mechanical instrument stood behind her. Only part of the scale was visible. Daniel enlarged the image. The pointer was not at 0, not 593, not 904. It showed 311. The frame was not accidental. The older Eleanor was not merely warning them against resetting the mechanism. She was showing the correct value for the isolated gallery. Daniel reported the discovery. Sato closed his eyes, then she is still inside. He said. Eleanor asked how he knew, because she pulled the platform back. Daniel had believed Sato pushed the cart in the recording. The engineer disagreed. He only touched the camera. The platform had been pulled from inside the measurement chamber. The older Eleanor was not trying to lure them inside. She was preventing the other Daniel from reaching the mechanism first. Daniel felt another foreign memory. His hands on the scale, 3 journals beneath one arm, a voice saying, "If we leave it at 311, the doors will close with the people inside." That was why the other Daniel chose 0. He wanted to save everyone immediately and created a route where they returned with mixed memories. The present Daniel now knew that his most dangerous opponent inside the tunnel would not be a creature or ghost. It would be a version of himself who had already made a decision and still believed it was correct. Near 9 in the morning, the first drop fell from the slope. Then a second. The forecast did not predict rain until evening. The sky above the northern entrance remained bright. Water fell only in front of the gate, a narrow strip no more than several meters wide. K-17 was creating its own weather. Sato stood, one lamp activated deep in the tunnel, then another. The light moved toward them section by section. When the nearest lamp turned on, a metal door appeared on the wall behind Sato. K-17, the plate showed 311, the handle slowly lowered on its own. Sato moved away from the wall. "She is ready," he said. Someone struck metal against stone 3 times behind the door this time. The rhythm did not resemble construction, it resembled a signal. 3 impacts, a pause, 3 more. Daniel recognized the rhythm from the memory that was not his. It was how the other Eleanor signaled from the measurement chamber. She was waiting for them, and waiting with her was another Daniel who already knew how to save everyone in the wrong way. The rain never grew heavier. It remained strangely local. A narrow strip of water fell only in front of the northern gate. As though the mountain itself separated one reality from another, a few meters away the pavement was completely dry. Daniel Carter watched the drops strike the rails. None crossed the threshold. The water seemed unable to enter the tunnel. Eleanor Brooks spread a new diagram across the hood of the vehicle. It was no longer a map of the tunnel. It was a map of decisions. Each member received exactly one task. Daniel would keep the investigation log and never touch the mechanism. Eleanor would authorize every change of route. Tanaka would control time and confirm every order. Nakamura would operate only the measuring equipment. Naoki Sato would remain outside the gate. His only responsibility was to report if his memories changed. There would be no backup plans, no alternatives. Everyone read the document carefully, then each signed it. Daniel noticed Eleanor's signature hesitate slightly. "She noticed it too. If I begin remembering another route," she said quietly, "take away my authority to decide." Nobody answered immediately after a long silence. Tanaka nodded. It became the first amendment to the plan. At 9:42 a.m. the gate opened. Sato remained outside. He watched them enter as though he already knew when they would return. Or knew that not all of them would. The first 100 meters looked ordinary wet concrete, maintenance cables, repair marks, service rails. Nakamura's measuring wheel matched the laser perfectly. At 103 meters they stopped. Yesterday Sato had stood there, today the tunnel was empty, no door, no person. Daniel examined the floor. Only pale stone dust remained. Nakamura placed a laser reflector. The beam returned perfectly. 593 meters, for the first time both entrances agreed. Eleanor ordered them forward. At 140 meters the air became colder, slowly, not suddenly. Daniel smelled old machine oil, the same scent from the memory that should not exist. Nobody mentioned it, they had agreed not to speak about shared memories unless necessary. At 170 meters the modern lights disappeared, old frosted lamps replaced them. Tanaka checked his stopwatch. 11 minutes. Daniel's body camera showed 13. Nakamura's watch showed 9. Time had begun to separate again. Tanaka immediately ordered everyone to trust only his stopwatch. A few minutes later they reached another door. Not K17, only one faded word remained on the plate, measurement. Daniel recognized the bronze handle instantly, he had seen it before. In someone else's memory, Eleanor announced the decision aloud, open together. Tanaka repeated it. Nakamura confirmed, Daniel confirmed, only then did Eleanor press the handle. The circular chamber existed, not as memory, not as evidence, it was real. The room measured roughly 20 meters across. A massive brass mechanism occupied its center. 2 doors stood opposite one another, the entrance behind them another mark simply. Thousands of vertical marks covered the walls. Daniel realized each represented another recorded measurement, another attempt. Another route. Nakamura inspected the mechanism without touching it. The primary needle rested at 592.8. Daniel opened his journal. The main route is almost stable. He stopped. Someone coughed quietly. An elderly worker sat on a stone bench. His helmet carried one number. He slowly raised his head. You arrived sooner than last time. His English was broken but understandable. Daniel asked carefully, what is your name? Kenji Morita. The journals had been correct. Morita explained that he had stopped counting years long ago. There was no day or night there, only new teams. New measurements, new attempts, you all want to find the correct exit, he said, but the tunnel is not searching for an exit, it is searching for a decision that does not contradict itself. Daniel looked toward door 311. It stood slightly open, metal struck stone beyond it. 3 impacts, pause, 3 more. Eleanor stepped forward. Morita suddenly stood. Not yet. For the first time his voice became urgent. If you open that door now, you will not meet yourselves, you will meet your last decision. Silence filled the chamber. Daniel felt the foreign memories returning. He remembered standing before that door, arguing with Eleanor, watching the mechanism fall towards 0, but now another detail surfaced. The other Daniel had hesitated, even that route had not been inevitable. At that moment Nakamura quietly called everyone over. The main needle was moving by itself. 592.8, 592.9. When it touched the mark, the chamber trembled. A heavy metallic impact echoed somewhere deep inside the mountain. Morita closed his eyes. You have just closed one route, but immediately the second needle began to move. It increased on its own. The parallel gallery was replacing the lost distance. Daniel understood stabilizing the main tunnel was not enough. As long as the secondary distance continued growing, the anomaly would simply create another route. The problem was no longer the first needle. It was the second. It had to stop moving. At that exact moment, Daniel's own voice came from behind door 311. Don't listen to Morita, he already left us here once. The real Daniel did not answer. He slowly closed his journal. Now he knew. The figure beyond the door was not a ghost. It was another version of himself. One that already remembered an ending this team had not yet lived. The voice beyond door 311 did not repeat its warning. It waited. Only the mechanism could be heard inside the measurement chamber. Brass gears moved with a slow, dry scrape. The secondary needle continued forward. Every additional meter produced a faint movement beneath the floor. Daniel Carter watched the door and tried not to imagine what stood beyond it. He already knew how dangerous even an imagined route could become. Every image formed a possibility. Every possibility could receive its own distance. Eleanor Brooks remained beside the chamber's main entrance. She did not look at door 311. Her attention stayed on Daniel. State our last shared decision. Daniel answered first. We do not open the second door without a new agreed plan. Tanaka repeated it. Nakamura confirmed. Kenji Morita slowly shook his head. You already opened it. Daniel turned toward him. The elderly worker was watching the secondary needle. Not here. Morita explained. On another route. That is why it is moving. Eleanor asked whether they could stop the needle without opening the passage. Morita took his time before answering. 2 large numbered discs occupied the center of the brass machine. One ranged from 0 to 593. The other from 0 to 311. A narrow system of levers connected them to both doors. Yes, he said, but both sides must make the same decision. Daniel gradually understood. The group beyond the door was also affecting the machine. The additional distance was not increasing merely because another route existed. It grew because two versions of the same people continued acting differently. One group waited, the other tried to finish the investigation. As long as the decisions contradicted one another, K-17 had a reason to preserve both paths. Daniel approached Nakamura. Can we send a signal through the mechanism? She inspected the controls without touching them. Two handles were positioned symmetrically, one on their side. Another likely existed opposite it. Between them was a narrow row of numbered metal plates. Nakamura believed it was a mechanical position recorder. Turning one handle might transmit movement to the other side. Eleanor reminded her of the assigned role. Nakamura could operate the mechanism, but only after a clear order. The secondary needle reached 318. One impact sounded beyond the door. Not three, only one. Morita looked at the mechanism. They are answering. Daniel had heard no question. Then he understood. Each new meter created a tremor in the room. The other side probably felt the same thing. The impact had been deliberate. Daniel lifted a metal key from the instrument table and lightly struck the casing. Once, the reply came almost immediately. One impact, Daniel struck twice. Two impacts answered. Communication was possible. Eleanor authorized a simple code. One impact meant yes, two meant no, three meant repeat, four meant danger. Daniel transmitted the code slowly, separating each sequence with long pauses. The other side repeated it without error. They could now communicate without opening the door. Daniel formed the first question, are you trying to set the scale to 0? He transmitted it using a basic letter code while Tanaka recorded every sequence. The answer came seconds later. Yes, one impact. Daniel closed his eyes. The memory from his alternate self was correct. The other Daniel was still trying to repeat the failed solution. The next question, do you know about us? Yes, how many are you? 5 separate impacts sounded. Daniel looked at the people around him. There were 5 including Morita, but Morita had not entered with them. Beyond the door might be Daniel, Eleanor, Tanaka, Nakamura, and someone else, perhaps Sato or another Morita. Eleanor ordered Daniel to ask who the 5th person was. The response took time and Aoki Naoki. Daniel felt relief for only a moment. Sato remained at the northern gate on their route. On the parallel route, he had already entered with the group. That explained why the outside Sato remembered several versions of events. His routes continued crossing. Daniel transmitted. Do not set 0. Correct distribution is 593 and 311. No answer came. The secondary needle stopped at 320. The mechanism became still. The chamber fell silent. Then 4 impacts sounded beyond the door. Danger. Immediately afterward, door 311 shook. The handle lowered several centimeters. Eleanor ordered everyone back. The narrow gap between the door and frame widened. Cold air and stone dust entered the room. Daniel saw part of another chamber. It looked nearly identical, the same circular form, the same mechanism, but its walls were damaged. Several floor rings had lifted. The lamps flickered. A hand appeared through the gap. Daniel's hand. The fingers were covered in black grease. Do not close it, his voice said. It has already started. The real Daniel did not move. The other hand gripped the door more tightly. If it closes, we remain on the additional route. Eleanor answered calmly, you selected 0. Because 311 will trap people inside. 0 combines the routes, but everyone gets out. They return with someone else's memories. There was a pause beyond the door. Then the other Daniel said quietly, that is better than leaving them here. Morita approached. You already did that. The other Daniel fell silent. The elderly worker stood before the gap. I saw the people you released. They returned to the tunnel one by one, some after a week. Some after 20 years. They came back because they remembered a road they had never walked. The hand remained in the opening. Then what do you suggest? The other Daniel asked. Morita looked at the people waiting in the room. There were now more than several dozen. They appeared silently along the walls, workers from different periods. Engineers, members of missing teams. Some looked young even though they should have aged outside. Others appeared to have spent decades there. Give them one exit, Morita said, but do not take away the memory of where they came from. The other Daniel said it was impossible. Nakamura suddenly raised her head no. Everyone turned. She stood beside the mechanism, studying the row of metal plates. Each plate had 2 positions. Main route, compensating route until now. They had believed the machine merely divided distance between 2 galleries, but beneath the plate marked 311, Nakamura found a 3rd symbol. It was almost worn away, not a number. A closed circle. Morita identified it as an old engineering symbol for a return circuit. A route with no exit that returned to its own beginning. Daniel studied the 1927 plan. The parallel gallery ended in a circular chamber. They had always assumed it was a dead end. It might instead be a closed loop. Not a road where people remained forever. A route that no longer intersected the main tunnel or added distance between the entrances. Eleanor formed the possible solution. The main route would remain fixed at 593 meters. The additional 311 meters would not be destroyed or reset. They would be closed into themselves. Everyone inside the measurement chamber would receive an exit through the main tunnel. Alternative routes would lose access to the outside entrances but would not be erased. They would become a completed circuit. Both orders from 1927 would be fulfilled. The passage connected, the compensating gallery sealed. Most importantly, no decision would be cancelled. It would simply stop leading outside. Daniel transmitted the explanation. No answer came for a long time, then the other Daniel asked, "What happens to us?" Morita answered honestly, "I do not know." Eleanor added, "You may become part of the closed route, meaning we remain here, probably, and you leave, probably." The other Daniel laughed. It was brief and exhausted. "Then you are asking me to decide that my version is less real." The real Daniel moved closer to the door. He could see part of his own face through the gap, the same nose, the same eyes, but the other Daniel looked several days older. A bruise darkened the skin beneath his right eye. His lip was split. "No." Daniel said, "I am asking you to complete the route you already created. Easy to say when the exit remains on your side. I do not know which side will keep the exit after the switch." The other Daniel studied him. It was true, neither had any guarantee. The route beyond the door might become the main one. Their own group might enter the circuit. K-17 did not identify which version of a person was original. It preserved decisions. Eleanor said what everyone was thinking. "We will not choose which group is real. Both groups would perform the same actions at the same time. Then the mechanism would have no reason to favor either route." Nakamura explained the procedure. Each side of the mechanism should have 3 controls. The first fixed 593, the second fixed 311. The third converted the compensating gallery into a closed circuit. All 3 had to be activated simultaneously from both sides. If one group acted first, the mechanism might recognize its route as primary. If they acted together, 2 decisions would become 1. Tanaka established a synchronization rhythm, 10 impacts. After the 10th, both Nakamuras would begin the adjustment. Daniel did not know whether the other Nakamura was alive or near the instrument. The other Daniel answered, "She is here." Yuki Nakamura appeared behind him. One side of her safety glasses was broken. Dark dust covered her hands. She inspected the mechanism through the opening and immediately understood the plan. Then the other Eleanor approached. Her left hand was bandaged. As in the night recording, she looked at the real Eleanor. There was no fear or surprise between them. Only exhaustion. "You did not open the door," the older Eleanor said. "Another version of me did. There is almost no difference now." "There is. I can still choose not to repeat your route." The older Eleanor lowered her eyes. "I thought that too." Tanaka and Sato stood behind her. The other Sato looked worse than the one outside. His hair clung to his forehead. His eyes were red from exhaustion. He held the K-17 key. Both groups had the same members. Daniel, Eleanor, Tanaka, Nakamura, Sato. Only Morita existed on one side. Daniel asked why. "Because I did not enter with either of you," Morita replied. He belonged to the chamber itself, not to a route. That meant the change might not give him an exit. Morita knew. Daniel saw it in his face. "You have waited here for 77 years, not 77 for me. Do you want to leave?" The elderly worker looked toward the entrance. Beyond it was the tunnel. "Light time, I did," he said, "for a long time. Then I became afraid there was no place outside that remembered me." Daniel found no answer. Morita approached the people along the walls. He explained what would happen in Japanese, slowly and without promises. Some stood immediately. Others remained seated. Several began to cry. Though their faces showed little emotion, they were not afraid of the tunnel. They were afraid of one shared exit. Each person had a different version of the world they wanted to return to. For some, only an hour had passed. For others, decades. The main route might deliver everyone to a single day. August 2, 2026. For most of them, life outside had already continued without them. Eleanor allowed them to choose. Those who wanted to leave would stand near the main door. Those who were not ready could remain by the walls. Daniel understood the risk. Each separate choice could create more routes. Morita disagreed. "Not this time. They are not choosing a path. They are choosing whether to complete it." The distinction was narrow, but the mechanism did not react. The secondary needle remained at 320. People began to rise. The 3 members of the 1998 expedition moved near the door. Several workers from the 1970s, an engineer from 1988, 2 men in 1927 uniforms. Kenji Morita remained beside the machine. Daniel asked why someone must close the chamber after you. Nakamura said the circuit would activate automatically. Morita shook his head. The mechanism closes the route. But the door must be locked manually. He pointed toward Sato's key. The lock worked from both sides. When the groups left, someone had to remain and turn the key as the circuit closed. Otherwise, K-17 could reopen during rain. Daniel immediately said they would find another way. Morita did not argue. Try. Nakamura inspected the lock. It was entirely mechanical. No remote actuator, no cable or electrical contact. They could leave the key in place and try to turn it from the opposite side, but after the switch, the door might be hundreds of meters away or on a different route entirely. The risk was too high. The other Sato stepped forward. I will remain. Another version of him already existed outside the northern gate. The one inside believed his presence was unnecessary. Eleanor objected. You are not a copy, but Naoki Sato already exists outside, with your body and memories from several routes. Exactly. If both of us leave, the intersection begins again. Sato was right. Two versions of one person entering the main tunnel at the same time could recreate the contradiction. The other Daniel looked at his Sato. We do not solve this by calling someone extra. Sato answered. I am choosing to complete my route here. The mechanism did not move. The needle did not change. It was a completion, not a new branch. Morita placed one hand on Sato's shoulder. The lock needs only one person, then leave with them. I belong to the chamber, and I belong to a route that already has another version outside. They looked at one another. Finally, Morita stepped back. He allowed Sato to remain. Daniel did not know whether it was the correct choice, but for the first time, the mechanism stopped scraping. As though K-17 had accepted a defined role, Tanaka began the synchronization. One impact, both groups took their positions. Nakamura beside the scales, Eleanor beside the main route lever, Daniel beside the compensating circuit lock. Although the original plan prohibited him from touching the mechanism, Eleanor reminded him. Daniel stepped back. Tanaka had to activate the circuit lock. Roles could not change at the final moment. The other Daniel smiled through the gap. I broke that rule. I know that is why we are here. Two impacts, those who chose to leave stood between the mechanism and the door. 3. Morita opened the main passage fully. A straight tunnel appeared beyond, not dark. Daylight shone at the far end. 4. The other group did the same. Their tunnel ended in rain. 2 different exits. 5. Nakamura set the primary needle exactly to 593. 6. The other Nakamura did the same. 7. Both secondary needles returned to 311. The chamber shook harder. Dust fell from the walls. 8. Tanaka placed his hand on the closed circuit symbol. His alternate version mirrored him. 9. Sato stood by the lock with the key. Morita moved beside those who intended to remain. Daniel looked at him. The old man nodded. No farewell. No final statement. 10. Tanaka pressed the control. Everything happened together. The brass gears stopped sharply. The 593 needle locked into place. The 311 needle dropped into the slot marked with the closed circle. The floor divided into metal segments. The rings began rotating in opposite directions. The door between the chambers opened completely. For 1 second, Daniel saw the alternate group without obstruction, face to face. The other Daniel stood several meters away. 3 journals from 1927 rested in his arms. Daniel suddenly understood where they had come from, not from the original shipment. The other version carried them out of the chamber and passed them into a route that later delivered the metal box to the archive. The cause came after its consequence. The other Daniel threw the journals across the boundary. The real Daniel caught them. Their weight was real. They have to remain on your route. The other Daniel said otherwise. It begins again through the documents. The floor moved. The 2 chambers began separating, not physically. The space between them stretched. The other Daniel became smaller even though the door remained close. Eleanor ordered everyone toward the main exit. The waiting people moved, not chaotically. In pairs, Tanaka counted them aloud. 1, 2, 3. The 1998 investigators crossed 4, 5. Workers from the 1976. 7 engineers from 1927. Each person briefly split while crossing. One silhouette moved toward daylight. Another turned into the opposite tunnel. Then one disappeared. The mechanism was selecting a shared route. Daniel did not know by what rule. Perhaps the final completed decision. Perhaps the door beside which they had chosen to stand. Morita remained in the chamber. Those who did not want to leave stayed beside him. There were roughly 20. They watched silently. When the last person who chose the exit crossed, the older Eleanor approached the boundary. The real Eleanor extended one hand. Less than a meter separated them. Come with us. The older Eleanor looked at her bandaged hand, then at her group. Your route already has an Eleanor. You are not unnecessary, no. But I completed another path. It can end at the same exit. The older Eleanor shook her head. Not after what I did. She stepped back toward the other Daniel. He also remained away from the door. They chose to stay on their route. Not because they believed themselves less real, because their presence outside could restore two incompatible versions of the case. The real Daniel wanted to object, the other Daniel stopped him. "Do not turn this into another decision." The distance increased. His voice weakened. "Just finish yours." The other Nakamura and Tanaka also remained. They took places beside the machine, helping Sato. All 5 members of the alternate group made one shared choice: remain inside the circuit and close it. It was not defeat, their route received an ending. Sato inserted the key, the floor rings accelerated. Eleanor ordered the real group out. Daniel walked last. The 3 journals were held against his chest at the threshold. He looked back. Morita stood at the center of the chamber, the other Eleanor beside the mechanism. The other Daniel looking directly at him. Sato turned the key. The lock clicked at that moment. The chamber began folding into itself. Not collapsing, each wall moved farther away while also approaching its opposite side. The people did not shrink, but the space around them became a long circular corridor. Daniel watched door 311 connect to its own reverse side. A closed circuit. The last thing he heard was the other Daniel's voice. "Do not measure it again." The door closed. Daniel stood in the main tunnel. Eleanor, Tanaka, Nakamura, and the released people moved ahead. An ordinary stone wall stood behind him, no seam, no plate. Daniel did not stop. They followed the single plan, straight toward the northern exit. Tanaka controlled the time, 5 minutes, 10:15. The lighting remained modern, the distance between lamps did not change. No footsteps sounded ahead or behind. After 22 minutes, Daniel saw the gate. Naoki Sato stood beyond it, the outside version. He watched the people approaching, first Daniel, then the journals, then the empty space behind the group. He understood who had remained. Sato did not ask. The guards opened the gate. Eleanor emerged first, then Nakamura, Tanaka, then people from different decades. Some fell to their knees in the sunlight, others stood still, unable to understand why the trees had grown taller and the road had changed. Members of the 1998 team recognized Watanabe only after he spoke their names. A worker from 1971 asked whether the reconstruction had been completed. A man from 1927 looked at the vehicles and quietly sat on the wet pavement. Daniel came out last. The tunnel behind him remained straight, from the northern entrance. The distant southern light was visible. Nakamura immediately installed the laser scanner. The beam passed through the gallery. The display read 593.1 meters. She measured again 593.0. A third time 593.2. The variation was normal. The mechanical cart crossed in 9 minutes. The camera recorded 593 meters. The laser measured 593. A walking group required 11 minutes for the first time. Every method produced the same result. Daniel looked toward the sky. The narrow strip of rain had vanished. The pavement was drying. Eleanor opened the journals passed by the other Daniel. The first 2 were familiar 1927 documents. They had never seen the third. Its cover had no date. Inside was one English entry. The handwriting belonged to Daniel, not the present one. Main route fixed at 593 meters. Compensating gallery closed at 311. Do not repeat measurements during rain. Not because the length may change, because a new measurement creates another question the tunnel will try to answer. 5 signatures appeared below Daniel Carter. Eleanor Brooks, Hiroshi Tanaka, Yuki Nakamura, Naoki Sato. Another hand had added, Kenji Morita. Daniel turned the page. One sentence was written on the reverse. A route without an exit is not infinite. It simply returns everyone to their last decision. Daniel closed the journal. He did not know whether the people inside the closed gallery would experience time, whether they might one day change their ending, whether the circuit would remain stable forever. Only one conclusion was certain. The main tunnel no longer changed length, but K-17 had not been destroyed. It had been isolated, converted into a route with no access to the outside world. As long as no one tried to find it again. Sato approached Daniel. His face remained exhausted, but his eyes were clearer. I no longer remember the chamber, he said. Daniel asked whether that was good. Sato considered the question. I remember that it existed, but I do not remember which door I used for the first time. His body and memory belonged to the same route. Daniel recorded the statement, then asked about the key. Sato showed his empty hands. The key remained inside the closed circuit. There was no longer any way to open K-17 from the gate. During the evacuation, Watanabe ordered both roads closed. Medical teams began examinations. Identification continued for hours. Not every name could be confirmed. Some people had been missing for decades. Some were officially dead. 3 did not appear in any accessible record. Perhaps their documents had been lost. Perhaps they came from routes where their crews had different members. Eleanor refused to make quick conclusions. Each person received an identification number, medical examination, and separate interview. She prohibited questions about doors or suggestions about what they might have experienced. Their memories had to surface without influence, without new decisions imposed from outside. Near 3 in the afternoon, Nakamura completed a full laser survey. The tunnel was straight, 593 meters, no parallel gallery, no measurement chamber. Ground radar showed solid rock where the additional section appeared on the 1927 plan. The 311 meters no longer existed in accessible geometry, or had been sealed so completely that no device could detect them. Daniel walked toward the central section. That was where the door had appeared before. The wall was new only on the surface. Old masonry remained beneath a thin layer of repair concrete. He did not touch it. He did not measure the distance from the entrance. He did not search for a seam, he only passed. For several seconds, he thought he heard metal strike stone beyond the wall. Once, then twice. Daniel did not stop. He did not answer, because any answer might become another decision. 6 hours after the measurement chamber was sealed, the tunnel was still 593 meters long. Nakamura performed 27 separate checks. She used a laser scanner, a mechanical wheel, fixed cameras, and a small rail platform. 2 teams crossed in opposite directions. Another pair began from both entrances at the same time. Every result agreed. The distance from south to north was 593 meters, from north to south. The same, a person walking at a normal pace required approximately 10 minutes. No exit moved farther away. No footsteps sounded ahead. No one returned through the entrance they had used. For the first time in decades, the tunnel behaved like an ordinary engineering structure. Daniel Carter observed the final survey from the northern site. He did not approach the instruments. He did not look at the result before the test was complete. He did not ask whether the length remained stable. A question could also become a decision. Eleanor Brooks stood beside the medical tent. The people released from the measurement chamber had been moved there. There were 19. 3 members of the 1998 expedition. 2 engineers from 1988. 4 workers who vanished during the 1970s. Several men whose names appeared in records from the 1950s and 1960s. And 2 builders from 1927. 3 others could not yet be connected to any known record. They gave real names. They remembered families, towns, and work crews, but no accessible archive contained proof of their birth or employment. One man claimed he belonged to a 14-person crew in 1935. The surviving log listed only 11. He knew every name in the record. He described the workers, dormitory. He remembered the shift supervisor and his room number, but the man himself appeared in none of the photographs. No released worker from the same period recognized him. Eleanor prohibited anyone from calling him the extra person. After everything they had learned about K-17, absence from a document proved nothing. Perhaps he came from a route with a different crew list. Perhaps his was the name erased after the day when more people emerged than entered. Each released person received an interpreter, a doctor, and an official from the Transportation Authority. The interviews took place without mirrors, tunnel plans, or photographs of the other missing workers. Eleanor did not want one testimony altering another person's memory. The first accounts barely matched. Some remembered walking for only minutes. Others remembered days. One engineer from 1988 claimed he spent 3 months inside the measurement chamber. According to him, the lights never went out, but new doors appeared every few hours. He opened none of them. He only recorded numbers on the wall. Those were the marks Daniel had seen beside the mechanism. A woman from the 1998 team remembered Naoki Sato. Although he had been a child at the time, she was certain Sato worked with them and ordered everyone not to look toward the northern exit. When shown the present Sato, she did not recognize his face, but she knew the number of his company vehicle. Another released worker remembered Daniel, not the present one, the version who remained in the closed circuit. He claimed Daniel visited the chamber several times carrying journals and asking how many people were prepared to stay. The real Daniel did not request further detail. He recorded the statement and closed the file. Some memories could belong to routes that no longer had an exit. There was no way to verify them. By 6 in the evening, the medical teams completed their first examinations. Everyone was physically stable. The oldest workers had barely aged since their disappearance. Their bodies matched the age they had when they entered. That did not mean time had no effect inside. Some had longer hair. Their clothing showed extended wear. One man had an old scar absent from his pre-war medical record. They had lived inside the chamber. They simply had not aged in the way they should have outside. The most difficult part was not medical. Someone had to tell them the year. Eleanor attended the first conversation with the builders from 1927. Their names were Haruto Mori and Shigeru Akiyama. Both believed they had spent less than 1 week inside, when the interpreter stated the date. Akiyama asked him to repeat it. Then he laughed, not because he disbelieved him. He assumed he had misunderstood the number when the date was written on paper. Akiyama stared at it for a long time and asked to leave the tent. Electric lamps stood over the hillside. Modern vehicles filled the road. Telephone screens glowed in the medic's hands. Akiyama said nothing. He sat on a folding chair and watched the trees. Mori asked about his wife. In 1927, she had been expecting a child. Tanaka found the local registry. The child had been born, a girl. She lived for 89 years and died 7 years earlier. She left 2 children, 4 grandchildren, and a photograph of the father the family believed had died during tunnel construction. Eleanor did not tell Mori everything at once. She only said his family had continued. Specialists would explain the rest after the records were confirmed. Daniel watched from a distance. Inside the archive reports, missing people had been numbers. 11 entered, 12 returned, 3 disappeared. 1 came back. Here the numbers became people again. Each had a home that no longer existed, a family that had grown old, a world that continued without them. Closing K-17 returned their exit. It did not return the lost years. Naoki Sato remained near the northern entrance until every check was complete. Doctors examined him. Physically, he appeared to have spent only several days without proper food or sleep, although 11 days had passed outside. He remembered the vehicle, the rain, and his first entry. He remembered the K-17 door. After that, his memories broke apart. He knew he had spoken to Daniel and Eleanor through the camera. He knew another version of him remained inside the measurement chamber. But he could not remember that version's face when Daniel asked how he felt about it. Sato was silent for a long time. It feels as if I returned instead of someone who deserved the exit just as much. Daniel did not tell him that he was the real one after K-17. The word real had lost its precision. You completed your route, Daniel said. Sato nodded. That was enough. That evening, Hoshin Civil Engineering formally withdrew from the reconstruction. The company cited structural risk, legal uncertainty, and the need for new government assessment. The Transportation Authority decided not to reopen the tunnel. Both entrances would be secured with ordinary gates rather than concrete walls. Eleanor insisted on that point. Sealing it with masonry might repeat the original order from 1927. They could not recreate the contradiction between a passage that existed and one that was ordered not to exist. The tunnel remained physically accessible. Its use was prohibited. Official maps would identify it as a closed transportation structure measuring 593 meters. There would be no reference to K-17, no mention of the parallel gallery. Daniel was not certain concealing the information was right, but a public report about a tunnel with changing length would attract researchers, content creators, and people eager to perform their own measurements. Every measurement was a question. K-17 had a habit of answering. At 8:14 p.m., Nakamura completed the final scan before the equipment was removed. 593 meters, then the laser scanner was switched off. The mechanical wheel was packed away. Cameras remained only at the entrances. They faced the gates and roads, not the interior. No instrument would measure the tunnel again. Before leaving, Daniel walked through one final time, not as a test, as the completion of a route. Eleanor went with him. Tanaka and Nakamura remained near the northern entrance. Sato stayed with the medical team. Daniel and Eleanor entered from the south at 8:31. They carried no rangefinder. They activated no body cameras. They did not count steps. Modern lamps illuminated the passage. Water moved steadily through the drainage channel. The echo matched their movement. Daniel saw no doors near the central section. Eleanor stopped. A pale area remained where workers had removed the concrete partition during reconstruction. Was the other gallery here, she asked. Daniel did not answer immediately. The question referred to the past, but even that could become an attempt to define the space. A route we no longer use existed here. Eleanor accepted the wording. They continued. Near the northern exit, Daniel heard 3 impacts. Far behind them, metal against stone. A pause, 3 more. The other Eleanor's signal. Daniel stopped for only a moment. Eleanor heard it too. She did not look back. We do not answer. Daniel confirmed. We do not answer. It was their final shared decision inside the tunnel. They crossed the northern gate. No one recorded the travel time. 3 days later, Daniel, Eleanor, and the case materials returned to the archive. The third metal box traveled separately. Its scale remained at 593. There was no key in the lock. The box was placed in isolation storage, not because it could be opened, but because it had already moved between routes without physical access. The 1927 journals were stored in a different sector. Daniel insisted they never be placed in the same container as the box. Cause and consequence could not be allowed to meet again. The official case report had 3 versions. The first was for Haitian civil engineering. It described unstable equipment readings, the discovery of an undocumented cavity, and successful structural stabilization. The second was for the Transportation Authority. It included the missing people and the recommendation that access remain permanently restricted. The third remained inside the Archive-S classified system, case #15, the tunnel without an exit. Eleanor assigned the final status: anomaly isolated, main route stabilized. Further investigation prohibited. Daniel added a note: do not use the term destroyed. The compensating gallery may continue to exist as a closed spatial circuit. Below it, he preserved the 5 rules written after their first entry and added a 6th, a person, object, or memory may belong to a route that no longer exists in accessible geometry. He hesitated before adding a 7th. Not every voice from a closed route is asking to be rescued. Sometimes it is only testing whether someone is willing to answer again. The released workers were transferred to a secure medical center. Their return could not be publicly explained. Separate identity procedures were created for relatives, where no living family remained. The state began restoring legal records. Haruto Mori met his daughter's grandchildren 2 weeks later. Daniel was not present. He read only the psychologist's short report. The meeting lasted 40 minutes. At first, no one knew what to say. Then one grandchild brought an old family photograph. Mori recognized his wife in the image. She was older than he had ever known her. Their adult daughter stood beside her. Mori asked to keep the photograph. It was the only object from the outside world he accepted on the first day. The 3 surviving members of the 1998 expedition agreed to provide separate testimony. Their accounts did not match. One remembered Ishikawa abandoning the group. Another insisted Ishikawa never entered the technical room. The third was certain 5 people took part in the expedition. She could not remember the 5th name. The 1998 photograph still showed 4. Daniel no longer tried to determine which account was correct. They could all have been true on routes that once intersected. Riku Hayashi left the hospital 9 days later. He stopped standing beside the door at 10:09. He stopped speaking about returning 3 minutes. His memory of the incident remained incomplete. He remembered the failed lamp, turning back, the northern exit, and the yellow helmet hanging from a hook inside K-17. The helmet found at the hotel vanished on the day the tunnel stabilized. The evidence bag remained sealed at 9:59. The object was visible inside on camera. At 10:00, the bag was empty, the seal was intact. Hayashi refused to work in tunnels again. Hoshin moved him to a surface project. Naoki Sato resigned 1 month later. He sent Daniel a brief letter. He no longer remembered the measurement chamber. He saw no more doors, but during heavy rain, he sometimes woke with the feeling that someone stood in the next room waiting for him to make a choice. Sato learned not to get up, not to check the door, not to switch on the light. He remained in bed until the feeling passed. Daniel added the letter to the file, not as evidence that K-17 remained active. As a possible psychological effect, he did not want to transform every fear into a new route. 6 weeks passed. The tunnel was monitored only by cameras at the entrances. The gates remained closed, no intrusion was recorded. Its length was never measured again. Weather in the area remained normal. During 2 heavy storms, the cameras showed no doors, lights, or people near the walls. The case gradually moved from active investigation into long-term observation. One evening, Daniel remained at the archive after the working day ended. He was indexing the recovered documents. The underground sector was quiet. Only ventilation and the occasional click of the cooling system could be heard. The third 1927 journal rested before him. The one passed to him by the alternate Daniel. He had already examined every page, tested the paper, tested the ink, checked the order of the entries. Nothing new had been found. That evening, moisture appeared on the final page. A small dark mark near the lower edge. Daniel did not touch it. The stain slowly widened and formed a line of ink. Then another. Words appeared. The handwriting did not belong to the alternate Daniel. It was not the Japanese writing of the builders. It was Eleanor's hand. The circuit is stable. Daniel remained still. A second line appeared. We can no longer see the exit. Then a third. That is correct. Daniel felt relief he did not want to feel. If the message truly came from the closed route, the other group remained alive. They had completed their work. But the ink continued moving. Do not answer. Daniel stepped back from the table. The pen lay several meters away. His hands were empty. A final sentence appeared. It repeats our words. The archive lights went out. Emergency lamps activated 1 second later. Daniel heard water somewhere beyond the rows of metal shelves. It fell onto concrete, then came footsteps. Slow, even, they approached, but the echo never changed, just like the first telephone call. Daniel did not call Eleanor, he did not activate a camera. He did not ask who was there. He closed the journal, locked it inside a metal drawer, then spoke only one sentence. The investigation is closed. The footsteps stopped. The water disappeared. The lights returned. Daniel opened the drawer only the following morning with Eleanor beside him. The writing remained, all 5 lines. Eleanor read them silently. Then checked the archive cameras. No one had entered the sector during the night. The lights had not failed. Daniel remained seated at the table the entire time. On the recording, he never stood, never closed the journal, never approached the drawer. The camera showed the final page remaining blank. Daniel and Eleanor watched the recording twice, then she asked whether the event should be added to the report. Daniel looked at the journal. No, it was not an attempt to hide evidence. It was a decision not to open another investigation. Eleanor agreed. They sealed the journal inside a protective container. A warning was written on the lid: do not read during rain. Not because the pages might change, because someone inside the closed route might still remember their voices. And something else had learned how to repeat them. 1 year later, the tunnel remained 593 meters long. The cameras recorded no further anomaly. Grass grew across the roads near both entrances. Warning signs faded. Local residents stopped reporting lights inside. On official maps, K-17 no longer existed. There was only an old closed tunnel, straight, empty, with one entrance on each side. Daniel never measured it again. And that was why its length never changed.